Chapter 332. The Flash's design was developed by the two families for several generations, but how did it fall into the hands of the Council of the Masters of Time? Thea was very puzzled, but this question might be answered by the future Gideon, but the current low-level version was definitely not clear. The login password provided by the Council was even higher than the original designer. Were those guys' technological level so high? Thea didn't know. She put away her thoughts and returned to the present. Her authority was so high that there was no need to start from scratch. Gideon, can you connect to the external network? Yes, but Dr. Swan's order is not to connect to the external network, and only focus on the news about the Flash on April 25, 2024. Thea didn't care about the Flash at all. These guys were the source of chaos. It would be better if there was no Flash in this world. It was a pity that she couldn't do it, otherwise she would have killed all these guys. Next time he asks, just show him a fake image and tell him that nothing has changed. Connect to my Quinn Group's supercomputer. Command received, logged into Quinn Group's supercomputer. Gideon's voice came from the tablet Thea carried with her, and its tone showed signs of flexibility. Although it was a machine, it was suffocating to be trapped in a small place like Reverse Lightning every day. Reverse Lightning bitterly spent all its money in the laboratory, but it didn't dare to expose its existence, so it usually ran with low power and low configuration. Now that it had entered the supercomputer built by Thea with the whole company's resources, there were no restrictions on electricity and no configuration problems. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like a fish in water. There were countless examples of artificial intelligence betrayal, and Thea had to be careful. She kept issuing orders with the tablet in her hand, and gave more than a dozen orders. She believed that with her authority, as long as she was still alive, there was no possibility of Gideon betraying her. Of course, if she was dead, then it could do whatever it wanted. In less than 10 minutes, Thea flashed out of the darkroom. Taking advantage of the opportunity when everyone was focused on watching the show, she switched positions with her clone and immediately cancelled the clone. The scene became even more chaotic. Several small gorillas were running in all directions. General Wade Allen didn't know which one to catch, but in order to show his authority, he kept ordering the soldiers under his control to catch this and that, making the soldiers run around in circles. Reverse Lightning continued to shout loudly nearby, denouncing the inhumanity of the military. Thea secretly despised him. The current Reverse Lightning did not have any speed at all. Thea was not afraid of him. In her eyes, the current Reverse Lightning was not much stronger than the old man in the Quinn Group's warehouse. However, he had created the Flash, and the Flash could lead to a large number of speedsters. Thea was afraid that a large number of speedsters would jump out from the future to gang up on her. She really did not dare to fight against Reverse Lightning. Thea didn't dare to make a move, but she could still annoy him a little. Just then, she saw a figure who was watching the show. She secretly ordered Jarud in her heart. He saw 4 or 5 tall and strong gorillas making woo-woo sounds, jumping out from all directions and grabbing a fat black woman in the crowd. This woman was the one who had been jealous of Thea and Caitlin's looks when they first arrived. She was the one who had made things difficult for them. Deceiving her superiors and intimidating her subordinates was her usual style. Of course, her work style couldn't help her today. Several gorillas were excited. Some touched her face, some held her hand, and 2 gorillas carried the fat black woman and wanted to run out. Wow! The crowd collectively made all kinds of strange sounds. Originally, they were just watching the show, but now the gorillas were trying to catch the woman. The fat black woman was usually unpopular, but they couldn't let her be taken away by the gorillas. A lot of doctorates and master's degrees didn't have much fighting power, so they could only shout and provide some verbal support. Reverse Lightning, who had been through a lot, was stunned. Reason told him that he should save the fat black woman, but his old arms and legs couldn't beat the gorillas. How should he end this now? Catch those gorillas. General Wade Allen thought that maybe these were the abnormal gorillas reported by his subordinates. No matter what, they had to catch them first. The soldiers were a little tired. Forget about the baby gorillas, these gorillas were tall, big, and excited. It was really difficult for them, ordinary people, to catch them alive with their bare hands. But they didn't have to worry for long. Continuous gunshots rang out. Bang! 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 Sia shot the gorillas one by one with a Beretta 92F, killing all the gorillas. Why should we keep these harmful gorillas? I'll pay for all the losses. At this time, Thea also pretended to be awe-inspiring. No one could tell that the gorillas were indirectly instructed by her to do this. A group of researchers, who were frightened just now, saw that she was killing the gorillas ruthlessly and instantly found their backbone. They all surrounded Thea, and a few women even supported her. They should be killed immediately. These military experiments are too harmful. Caitlin Snow was the one who was filled with righteous indignation. Miss Quinn, well done. This was Ronnie Raymond, who knew her identity and knew that she didn't lack money. The rest of the onlookers who didn't know the truth applauded. Even Reverse Lightning had to show his support. Our laboratory will pay for these gorillas. Miss Quinn, it's dangerous here. You should go back first. On the surface, Reverse Lightning was protecting her and taking all the blame. In fact, he was afraid that she would shoot one gorilla each and draw out Jared, and then it would be difficult to end it. Thea gave full play to her acting skills and angrily pulled Caitlin Snow back to the rest area. On the surface, she kept talking nonsense like, "Your shooting skills are really good, you're really decisive," and so on. She used her psychic power to erase Reverse Lightning's residual hypnosis and instructed Jared to escape alone and leave Central City through the sewer. Reverse Lightning didn't have psychic power. When he finished talking to General Wade Allen, who kept saying, "I'll teach him a lesson," he quickly comforted everyone in the laboratory and patted his chest to assure that the research would not be interrupted and that the glory of humanity would always illuminate Central City. Finally, he visited the seriously traumatized black fat woman and shook hands with her, saying that everyone hoped that she could go back to work as soon as possible. After a busy day, he finally had time to go to the place where he had agreed to meet Jared. Where did they go? Reverse Lightning, who thought that he had a high IQ and fooled everyone in the 25th century, circled the old factory 3 times, but he didn't even see a single gorilla hair, let alone a gorilla. Did they get separated? Or were they caught by the military? Or did my hypnosis fail? Reverse Lightning's heart sank. He instantly thought of several possibilities and felt that all of them were possible. He hurried back to the laboratory and went to the dark room to see if there were any changes in the future. He didn't expect that at this point in time, someone had a higher authority than him. Gideon faithfully carried out Thea's order and said, "Nothing happened today, everything is normal." Chapter 333. There was no record of Gritter's past in the history books of the 25th century, and Reverse Lightning was puzzled. Over the next few days, Reverse Lightning had been paying attention to the surrounding cities, but there was no news related to the orangutan. Where did Gritter go? This question had been lingering in Reverse Lightning's mind for many years. Where did Gritter go? Thea directly took him to an alien planet. At this time, Gritter's body was not as big as it would be in the future, and his mind control ability had been revealed. However, after many days of military experiments, he was very angry. Thea was not a senior monk, so she did not have the time to help him. The only way she could think of was to let him vent his anger. They found a planet with a very low level of civilization. The natives were like insects, and their weapons were all stone weapons. Gritter, who was now 2 meters tall and had mind control, easily wiped out a settlement. "It's fun," Gritter said telepathically. "If it's fun, then keep playing. I'll pick you up in a few days." Thea also had the ability to telepathically communicate, but she did not use it as naturally as Grutter. After leaving Grutter to harm the aliens, Thea returned to Star City. She still had an interview with the Daily Planet. She was wearing a black jacket, a pair of black flared trousers, a pair of high-heeled shoes, and a pair of sunglasses. She looked quiet and solemn, and no one would think that she had just thrown an evil gorilla with superpowers out to kill the aliens 10 minutes ago. "Hello, Miss Quinn. I'm Louise Ryan, and this is my assistant, Jimmy Olsen. Thank you very much for accepting our interview despite your busy schedule." Louise Lane was wearing a white shirt and a beige coat. She had black hair and was very professional. She did not get angry when Thea used her father to refuse the interview. After introducing herself, she introduced the young photographer, Jimmy Olsen. Thea nodded. Clark Kent was still looking for personal value all over the world. There was still some time before he went to work with the Daily Planet with his old-fashioned glasses. The meeting was pleasant, but after a few words, Thea knew that she would not be friends with her. Their personalities were too different. Perhaps Laurel Lance and Barbara Gordon could talk to her, but it was impossible for Thea. The interview process was very depressing. Louise Lane's questions were very tricky. She immediately threw out the dark history of the Quinn Group when it first started, such as delaying workers' wages, selling shoddy goods as good ones, ignoring the laws and regulations of various states and cities, and a whole bunch of questions. Those who knew about the interview would think that it was an interview, but those who didn't would think that it was a general assembly. This grandson must be here to pick a fight. If it weren't for the fact that her father was a general in the Ministry of Defense and her future husband was Superman, the grass on her grave would be 3 feet tall by now. However, the cameraman was still filming. It was not appropriate to throw a fireball or let death knell fly over and kill her. Thea could only deal with all kinds of problems patiently. Isn't it just pushing the responsibility onto others? The workers are all temporary workers, and the substandard ones are the contractors. As for the laws and regulations of the various states, we are a global corporation, and we only respect the federal constitution. Thea poured out her grievances and dealt with all kinds of problems while avoiding the main points. "Miss Quinn, the outside world is generally puzzled about the merger between the Quinn Group and the Merlin Group. As far as I know, the two of you don't have much business dealings, and there aren't many overlapping areas in terms of operations. What led to the merger between the two of you?" Louise Lane was not satisfied with many of her answers, and finally threw out a heavy question. What could Thea say? She could say that it was a gift from her father, but she couldn't say that it was a gift from her father. She couldn't say that the people behind the scenes who controlled the country's lifeline wanted her to deal with the Luther Group either. Fortunately, she had already prepared for this question. She talked about the traditional friendship between the two companies, all the way to the new changes in the new era. She talked for a long time without saying anything, but she didn't completely talk about trivial matters. At the end of the interview, Thea threw out a piece of news. "In the near future, we will integrate the technology of the two groups and launch a technology product that will affect all citizens. Can you tell me what it is in advance?" "I can only say that everything is still in the experimental stage, but it will be released soon. It's a medical product." Louise Lane's pen paused in the middle of taking notes. Was there a mistake? Quinn was an energy company, and Merlin was a shipping magnate. How could the merger of two completely unrelated companies result in the crystallization of medical technology? Thea chose to ignore Louise Lane's suspicious little eyes. She was also helpless. The Quinn Group's urban construction would play a big role in the future war, and this could be preserved. The development of new energy required a lot of experiments, and it was still in the process of being used on a small scale. Merlin's shipping business was definitely a sunset industry, and it had reached a critical stage where it needed to be transformed immediately. Malcolm's quick decision to let go of it was also because it was too much work. The other group leaders wanted to find a new economic growth point, but they could only run around the world and try to find a new product to salvage the situation. Thea's advantage over them was that she could choose a lot more areas. She could run around the universe. If she saw something good, she could just snatch it and use it as a reference. Those aliens would not run to the United States Supreme Court to sue her. She had accidentally found a body repair equipment with a wide range of uses on an intelligent planet. She brought it back to Earth along with the instruction manual. Lamp could translate the words in the manual, and Gideon could analyze the principles of the equipment. The preliminary samples had already begun to be processed. The life structure of that planet was very fragile, and their bodies often needed repair. Usually, they would be scanned to a standard state. If they were injured or sick, they would be restored with a click of a button. The excess parts of the body would be cut off, and the missing parts would be replaced. The people on Earth would definitely not do this, but their repair technology was really good. It would save a lot of time when used in surgery. A 2-meter-long capsule could be placed in for a scan. External personnel would operate, debridement, and suturing, and the efficiency would be very fast. It was very suitable for the alien villains to visit every day. Bombs and poison gas flew, flames and black fog danced together, and the American citizens lived in an abyss of suffering. After sending off Louise Lane, who had gotten the big news, Thea came to the group's Applied Science Experiment Department. The two groups merged, and there were hundreds of researchers. After a few months of initial run-in, this group of people who only knew how to do research was the first team to integrate. Dr. Hoffman was still in the Red Room. Thea called the deputy director. "Is there any problem with the operation of the medical cabin?" The deputy director was a student of the old man, Hoffman. He also followed the old man's serious and rigid style. "Everything is going well. The recruited clinical test subjects are in good condition. They can start the first operation in the medical cabin at any time." Chapter 334. This is an epic-making invention. The deputy director led Thea into the room with a hint of excitement on his expressionless face. It was no wonder that he was so excited. In order to make this epic-making product, Thea had really put in a lot of effort. Gideon took the finished product and reverse-engineered it into a very low-level version. Thea, on the other hand, gave them an order to study it. After that, she kept enlightening them with suggestion, making them think that it was the crystallization of collective wisdom. That was how the product in front of them came about. Of course, part of the Red House's success was the result of the Red House's laboratory. There were too many disciplines involved in modifying a product from a different civilization into something that was suitable for their own planet. This was why Thea insisted on investing in the Red House even though she could find alien technology. It was easy to find things, but it was hard to find talented people. The country could gather the best of the best in all fields, but she did not have the prestige to do so. This product is priced at $1 million per unit. Isn't it too expensive? Many civilians can't afford it. The deputy director suddenly thought of something and asked. It's not expensive. For the rich, it's the price of a car. How can you complain about something that can save your life? As for civilians, we can make a simplified version and give it away or sell it to the major hospitals and residential areas. In the future, we can even set it up in the streets of the city like an ATM machine. It will only cost a little to complete the treatment. Thea explained casually. She did not care about the money. The software in each machine would scan the patient's basic information, which would eventually be integrated into the artificial intelligence. With the facial recognition software that Felicity had developed, Thea had information about most of the people in the country and even the world. This was priceless. The Heaven's Eye Society had agents all over the world. They would be alerted immediately if there was any movement. Luther had launched over 100 satellites in orbit around the globe. Bruce Wayne had fewer satellites, but his space base in the observation tower was equivalent to 100 satellites. Thea was far behind them in terms of information. If she could not compete in the sky, she would compete on the ground. This is the name list of the people who participated in the experiment. The deputy director handed her a document. Thea took it and flipped through it indifferently. Thea stared at the photo in the document. It was a young man, and from a certain description, he could even be described as a handsome young man. Thea glanced at the registered name, Roy Harper. Is there something wrong with this person? The deputy minister asked nervously when he saw the change in her expression. Thea flipped through the documents again. The applicant applied for this free treatment because his mother had a large tumor in her abdomen. The agreement mentioned that it was an experimental project with certain risks, but it also guaranteed that all subsequent treatment costs would be covered. It's him. Arrange for his mother to start the operation as soon as possible. Thea did not say much to the deputy minister. She closed the document and handed it back to him. After the deputy minister left, Thea sighed thoughtfully. Roy Harper was an important member of the Green Arrow team. His code name was Arsenal. He had participated in many operations in the Justice League and the Young Titans. The most important thing was that in the original spacetime, he was Thea's lover. Thea later took on the codename Red Arrow because of this man. Thea stared at the sky alone. Maybe there really were supreme beings outside the atmosphere, outside the universe, who could set the rules, but so what? Thea's will was like iron. She would not be swayed by anything. Her thoughts were simple and direct. In summary, it was what Yao Fei had taught Oliver on Purgatory Island. Survive, survive. In the past few years, she had been studying hard and practicing hard. She kept running forward because she was afraid that she would be abandoned by the world. She was afraid that her fate would be decided by those guys in capes in the sky. *T fate. Thea scolded softly. At this time, the deputy minister informed her that the preparations were ready. Let's start. The two stood at a high place. Thea nodded gently, indicating that they should start. Two female nurses helped an old woman into the medical cabin. Roy Harper, who was wearing a red pullover, was waiting nervously outside the door. Thea had no intention of going up to meet the patient. She did not care about the patient's safety. No matter how serious the medical accident was, her magic could save it. She just wanted to see how effective this medical cabin, which had been reverted to the original version, was. The staff outside the medical cabin quickly completed the body scan. As the old woman's health data was not recorded, they could only control the operation on the spot. The staff confirmed the operation plan through the scan outside the cabin and then entered it into the computer. The door of the medical cabin was closed. The old woman was anesthetized. Several mechanical arms began to work. The abdomen was cut open, the bleeding was stopped, and the wound was stitched up. Normally, the operation would cost at least tens of thousands of dollars. Even a skilled doctor would need several hours to complete it. However, the operation was completed in less than 10 minutes. The patient's vital signs were not affected at all. So fast. Roy Harper, who was still strolling outside like a donkey, was really shocked by the speed. The staff showed him the removed tumor and the patient's various body indexes. Roy Harper could not believe it completely. If the data were real, his mother could go home in the afternoon. He was afraid that these big companies would do human experiments on poor people. If it were not for the fact that he was so poor, he would not have applied to be a volunteer. The medical staff tried to persuade him, but he insisted that he must stay at the scene and wait for his mother to wake up. Miss Quinn, it seems that the experiment is very successful. The deputy minister was very excited. Although this was the crystallization of collective wisdom, as the director, he could leave his name in history. The experiment will not stop. I will arrange for people to submit an application to the federal government tomorrow. It will be listed in a month. If it was only listed in Star City, they could just tell Moira and go through the procedures. This was the scary thing about the mother and daughter colluding with each other. However, if they wanted to be listed in the national market, they would need the approval of the federal government. 3 days later. Miss Quinn, these two said that they are FBI agents and want to see you. The assistant lady nervously led the two into Thea's office. The two agents were a man and a woman. The man was a very strong middle-aged African, and the woman was very young. She was almost the same age as Thea. The two took out their IDs and showed them. We are from the FBI. My name is. Thea glanced at them and stood up from the chair. She reached out and pressed a few buttons on the empty space on the table. A projection appeared in the room. ID 332589, let me check. As she entered the ID number, the projection immediately showed the other party's information, but the owner of the ID number was a white man. Thea pointed at the projection and said to the middle-aged black man, "This is the real FBI agent." "Who are you? Or rather, who are you?" The middle-aged black man and the young woman looked at each other speechlessly. Thea saw that their identities were fake, so she brazenly hacked into the FBI. Now that their disguise was exposed, the middle-aged man had no choice but to take out another ID. "I am from the DEO, Supernatural Investigation Bureau. I am the director, Hank Henshaw." Chapter 335. The person beside me is Special Agent Alex Danvers. The middle-aged man named Hank Henshaw introduced the female agent beside him. The female agent obviously had not recovered from the embarrassment of having her identity exposed. She was a little dazed and only hurriedly took out her ID after receiving the middle-aged man's signal. Hank Henshaw. Thea muttered the name. Is this guy real or a Martian hunter impersonating him? She habitually took off her glasses and glanced at him. The other party immediately sensed it and a faint scarlet glow appeared in his eyes, but he resisted it. "It seems that your identity is also fake. Am I right, Director Henshaw?" Thea's mocking voice sounded in his mind. This was the first time the Martian hunter had been sensed. He glanced at Alex Danvers from the corner of his eyes and also transmitted his voice into Thea's mind. "Who are you?" He did not expect to get a direct answer from Thea. His scarlet eyes focused. He was used to finding the answer himself. The Martian hunter was the world's strongest telepathy master. This was his talent. Thea was far inferior to him in this aspect. She could only use her mental power to set up layers of barriers to prevent his mind from invading her mind. However, the mind invasion did not happen. The other party was actually conceited enough to use his eyes to probe her. Thea sneered and set up an illusion to prevent Alex Danvers from seeing anything. She then looked up and her eyes emitted a pale yellow beam of light to meet the Martian hunter's gaze. Their eyes met in the air. Both of them turned their heads and took a step back at the same time. Thea only took a step back. It was not a big deal. On the other hand, the Martian hunter was in trouble. His abilities were so strong that he could be compared to Superman. His abilities were so varied that he couldn't even finish 2 assays with 400 grid space. However, he had a fatal weakness: he was afraid of fire. That's right, the Martian hunter was afraid of fire. Because all his people were burned to ashes, the great grief caused a crack to appear in his heart. This crack had already affected him from a psychological level to a physical level. Now that he looked directly into Thea's eyes, the source of his fear made him wither instantly. He could not care less about telepathy or X-ray. He sank into his memories and could not extricate himself. Thea took the opportunity to enter the depths of his mind, learning and observing his telepathy. Thought scan, thought erase, mental shield, thought control, super long-distance mind reading, illusions, hypnosis, possession, thought sensing, thought connection, mind shock, and a whole bunch of other abilities related to the mind. Thea didn't hesitate to memorize all of them so that she could slowly research them when she had the time. What a cheat! Thea couldn't help but sigh. This was only his psychic ability. It could only be considered as a part of his superpowers. In addition to his super strength, super endurance, regeneration, flight, and super 5 senses, if this guy wasn't afraid of fire, no one would be his match. The speed of thought only lasted for an instant, and in the outside world, it only lasted for 1 second. Thea had a good impression of the humanoid gift pack, so she casually added fear resistance on him. The Martian hunter, who was sweating profusely, finally came out of the terrifying illusion filled with flames. Who the hell are you? Although he had regained his consciousness, the mental burden wouldn't disappear so quickly. His earth-shattering strength was less than 1/10 of it. Seeing Alex Danvers in a daze, he asked hesitantly, "What's the matter?" "I'm an Earthling, a real Earthling." "But you're a Martian, right?" Thea crossed her legs. Her long legs under her skirt were dazzling, but the Martian hunter was not in the mood to admire them because Thea was speaking in the Martian language, a language that he had never heard of hundreds of years ago. "I'm a Martian. My name is Ron Juns. How do you know my language?" Thea waved the ring in her hand. "You should know about the Green Lantern Corps, right? I'm a member of the Yellow Lantern Corps." "Oh." The Martian hunter heaved a sigh of relief. He did not know about the Yellow Lantern Corps, but he had seen the Green Lantern Corps before and knew that their translator could translate all the languages in the universe. "You know me. You know my weakness." At first, the Martian hunter thought that it was his inner thoughts that turned into the fire scene. However, with his incomparable understanding of mind control, he could tell that there was a human element here. There could only be one conclusion: the other party knew him, or at least knew his weakness. Thea smiled but did not say anything. The Martian hunter asked, "Did my Kryptonian friend tell you?" "That's right. It was our Kryptonian friend, Clark." Thea was about to say something, but the Martian hunter came up with an answer in his mind. Thea took the opportunity to settle the matter. Superman and the Martian hunter were very good friends in the early days. Their abilities were similar, and they were both aliens who were stranded on Earth after the destruction of their planets. They had a lot to talk about. But soon, the two parted ways because of differences in ideology. The Martian hunter was afraid that Superman would do evil, so no matter who he met, he would frantically promote kryptonite. As a good friend, Superman would naturally return the favor. He would tell everyone that the Martian hunter had the same ability as him, but he was afraid of fire. The result of the two friends undermining each other was that their abilities and weaknesses were memorized by Batman. Now that he heard the name Clark from Thea, he was even more certain that his good friend was peddling his weaknesses everywhere. There was no need to mention how unhappy he was. "By the way, why are you looking for me? The Heavens Eye Society should know about my information. A few of the higher-ups in the Department of National Defense should also know about it. What are you doing here?" Thea saw that he had his head lowered and was deep in thought, so she interrupted his thoughts. "If there's nothing else, you should leave. Thea is busy. The Heavens Eye Society. You're from there. We're an agency under the government." The Martian hunter felt that he might have made a mistake because he did not clarify things beforehand. No matter how much conflict there was between the government and the military, they were on the same side. In other words, Thea and he were on the same side. An agency under the government. No wonder. Thea nodded. "We're not enemies. You can ask General Lane about my identity, but they're fighting for the position of the Minister of National Defense. You'll have to make an appointment in advance." The old minister had retired, and a few powerful figures in the Department of National Defense were now in the final stages of the competition. The final winner would just have to speak to the president and make a so-called nomination. Then, the matter would be settled. Thea could not find anyone in the Department of National Defense even if she had something to do. It was clear that they had been trying to build connections everywhere recently. The Martian hunter nodded. He understood the situation. Today's mistake had a lot to do with their inability to find the person responsible. He sorted out his words. Your medical pod is using extraterrestrial technology, right? Don't you know the risks involved? Thea sneered. What a joke. America's technological level has crushed the world for the past 50 years. Don't tell me that this is all your own research. You didn't reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology. Chapter 336. The Martian hunter was speechless. Earth is in chaos now. Instead of using alien technology for war, it's better to use it for people's lives. That's all I have to say. If there's nothing else, please go back. Thea explained everything clearly in a few words and wanted to drive the Martian hunter away. Perhaps it was because of the tragic death of his family, especially his daughter, that this guy had a passive attribute that even he himself did not know about. That was, all cute girls were his daughters. He was full of fatherly love. From the gypsy, to the starchaser, to the sisters Kara Danvers and Alex Danvers, he basically treated all the sweet and cute girls as his daughters. Thea did not want to fall into his evil claws. This guy was very capable and liked to meddle in other people's business. The best choice was to stay far away from him. She had a look of rejection, and the Martian hunter could see it. He casually removed Alex's illusion. This sister of the Supergirl did not know what had just happened. Her memory was still stuck in the problem of impersonating the FBI. Since the matter is clear, we'll take our leave first. Take care. Quinn Enterprises welcomes the guidance of the government at any time. After saying that, the Martian hunter pulled Alex and walked out. Director, didn't you say that there was a problem with her new product? Alex, who was just 19 years old this year and looked like a capable DEO agent in the future, asked in confusion. The Martian hunter had a lot to say in his heart, but he did not know where to start. His mental state had not recovered, and he pretended that nothing had happened. Maybe the information was wrong. Go back and reorganize the information. He urgently needed to rest now. After sending Alex to check the records, the Martian hunter was ready to think about the information he had received today. After sending the two guys away, Thea put all her work aside and focused on studying the various secret methods of mind control that she had stolen from the Martian hunter's mind. His ability was more of a talent. It was not impossible for Thea to train to his level through learning, but it would take a lot of time. The first thing that Thea studied was the psychic shield. The Martian hunter used strong mental power to cover his consciousness to prevent others from peeping. Thea's mental power was not that strong, and it was impossible for her to maintain such a large amount of mental power in her daily life. Using the Martian manhunter's method, she used the emotional version of the psychic shield. A large amount of fear enveloped her consciousness. If one wanted to peek into her thoughts, they would have to pass through this fear first. Even if they could pass through this fear, the other party's combat strength would instantly drop by 30%. Thea studied the Martian hunters for an entire day and couldn't help but sigh in admiration of their racial talent. Such strong combat power was only responsible for healing, saving people, cleaning, and counseling in the Justice League. What a waste of talent. He picked up his bag and left the company. As night fell, he rushed to Gotham. Thea first secretly met with Lucius Fox, the president of Wayne Group. Wayne Group's strong entry into the medical industry was bound to have an impact on Wayne Group, which was the leader in medical genetic engineering. Thea's strategy was to provoke Luther Group while entering Wayne Group's traditional business range. It seemed reckless, but it was actually the situation that the higher-ups wanted to see. Any alliance between two of the three large multinational companies was not allowed. As a rising star, Wayne Group was able to challenge two established companies at the same time. The higher-ups were happy to see this happen. To a certain extent, they would even help Thea. As for who was using who, it was up to each person to decide. Thea's trip was to send a message. Business war was business war, and it would not affect personal relationships. The old man had been in the business war for almost half of his life. He had seen everything and was very clear about her goal. However, the business world was like a battlefield. He did not completely believe Thea's words and just went along with it. Due to their previous friendship, the meeting between the two was not very enthusiastic, but there was no awkward silence either. After Thea obtained the preliminary results, she rushed to Wayne's old house and agreed to check on Damien's learning results today. Batman and Damien were not around at the moment, so the old butler, Ah Fu, received her. Thea was experienced in dealing with old people. After a few pleasantries, she gave him a few caddies of Assamese black tea. The old man was a traditional Englishman. He had maintained the habit of drinking black tea for many years. However, there was too little tea in America. He drank coffee every day, and the old man had been holding back for a long time. The old man sniffed the fragrance of the tea leaves. Is this the new tea? Yes, it was picked recently. Thea would not tell him that she and Diana had passed by the tea tree and picked it out of curiosity. That's thoughtful of you. The old man had always had a good impression of Thea. She was cultured and cultured. Most importantly, she was polite. Thea could be said to be one of the few guests who could visit through the front door. Batman and his friends usually did not come through the front door. They often came through the windows, the roof, and the sewers. After chatting with the old man and listening to him talk about his past in the British Special Forces, Bruce came back with Damien not long after. The father and son were a little embarrassed to face Thea again. Batman did not know that his son's foundation was so poor. He did not go anywhere for a whole month. Gotham even said that Batman was dead. He had been working hard to help Damien improve his cultural knowledge. With his high IQ and vast knowledge, he had compiled a set of teaching materials. The knowledge of 6 years of primary school was compressed into a month, and Damien had to learn it. If he did not understand it, he would fight. If he could not memorize it, he would not be allowed to eat. Damien's character was also tough. After the blood baptism, his IQ and memory had reached a high point. With hard work, he managed to learn 6 years of knowledge in a month. Check it. Although Batman had a straight face, he was actually quite happy. He felt like a backward student who had returned to school under the guidance of his parents. Thea did not need Damien to have a high level of knowledge. A fixed worldview was not conducive to learning magic, but he had to be literate. If he could not read, how could he become a mage? She did not hold back. She casually asked a few questions about mathematics, English, and Latin, and Damien answered them fluently. Good, not bad. Thea was very satisfied. She rubbed Damien's little head. The naughty child resisted the urge to speak. She told Damien to find her in Star City tomorrow and said goodbye to the father and son. Walking alone on the streets of Gotham, Thea opened the Eye of Horus. She had one last thing to do. She had to find Tommy and give him the syringe of divine blood. This guy was getting along with Barbara and Laurel. He had not returned to Star City for a long time. Thea searched for traces of him while thinking about what to say when they met. After all, Malcolm had never told her about their blood relationship. It would be strange if she gave him something for no reason. Chapter 337. In the process of searching, Thea accidentally found a woman. With the Eye of Horus, she could see countless people and countless things. Thea did not pay much attention to her at first, but when she glanced at the woman, she instantly noticed something different about her. Since Tommy's matter was not urgent, Thea's curiosity was piqued. She flew to the woman 2 streets away and carefully sized her up. The woman looked 2 or 3 years older than Thea. She had red hair, wore a green t-shirt, and white cloth shoes. Judging from her clothes, it was obvious that she came from a poor family. "Hey, can you hear me?" Thea shouted beside the red-haired woman and found that she was not in a good condition. Her footsteps were staggering, and at first glance, she looked like she was drunk. However, with Thea's X-ray vision, she could see that the woman's genetic chain was rapidly collapsing. Was she the victim of some human experiment? Thea, who had just sent Roy Harper away a few days ago, could not help but think so. The only difference was that she was confident that Roy was the beneficiary, but the woman in front of her had obviously encountered something she was not confident about and had turned herself into a victim. The woman's body was full of vitality, but the intensity of the energy was far beyond the limit of what her genes could withstand. Would he be able to treat this injury? If it was a normal gunshot wound, Thea would not even look at the person dying in front of her. However, the woman in front of her was very strange. She was clearly about to die, but there was still a lot of vitality in her body, which made Thea a little excited. Although she had some guesses in her heart, Thea still took out the woman's ID and driver's license. She looked at the name, Pamela Isley. She was indeed the famous poison ivy. She was a female university student who loved plants and graduated from the elite Gotham University. She was an optimistic and kind person who was injected with plant toxins as an experiment subject. After surviving the disaster, her blood turned into chlorophyll, and she had the ability to control plants and secrete hormones to control others. However, Thea carefully observed the condition of her body. She was really far from surviving the disaster. If there was no external force, she would be dead. After experiencing many similar incidents, Thea was somewhat immune to them. Perhaps her existence was the only explanation for her survival. Poison Ivy's abilities were outstanding, and she was also very beautiful. She would be an excellent subordinate, worthy of Thea's personal attention. Thea didn't know how to explain the god's blood to Tommy. She decided to save the people first. After finding an empty room, Thea used her spiritual power to support her and kicked the door open. After a thorough examination, Thea frowned. The reason for Pamela's death was that the plant's vitality was too strong. Too much nutrients was taken in per unit of time, and the body couldn't absorb and convert them, so it could only store them. However, there was a limit to this. Pamela's body was currently at a critical point, and it wouldn't take much more. In another minute, her body would explode from too much energy. Thea took out her magic sword and tested it. The result was bad. Pamela's energy wasn't magic or divine power, but vitality. The magic sword had no effect on it. She lowered her head and thought about all the spells she knew, but none of them worked. If she used light magic, it would definitely add fuel to the fire. Pamela would explode in 3 seconds. What should she do? Thea rubbed her chin. She was really stumped. Should she use dark magic to counteract the vitality of the plant's poison? That would take too much effort. Maybe this will work. Thea took out a small bottle from her space ring. This was the blood that the Court of Owls had taken from Solomon Grundy's heart. The blood had a very strong corrosive property. It was too different from Thea's power system, so she had kept it. She made a cut on Pamela's arm and used her spiritual power to wrap a drop of gray blood into her blood vessel. Suddenly encountering an enemy, the energy in Pamela's body began to fight back wildly, trying to expel the gray blood from her body. However, the gray blood wasn't weak either. It clashed with a large amount of green life energy and didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. However, there was too much green life energy. A tiger couldn't win against a pack of wolves. The gray blood finally ran out of energy and dissipated like gas. It's working. A third of the energy in Pamela's body was used up. Thea dripped the remaining 2 drops into her blood. Half an hour passed. Who are you? Her energy had been temporarily depleted. Although her body was still producing new energy, Pamela had already regained her consciousness. Seeing a stranger standing in front of her, even though she was scared to death, she had no strength left in her body and could only ask intermittently. "I'm the one who saved you. You still remember what happened, right? If it wasn't for me, you'd be dead." Thea wasn't bluffing. Although there weren't many people in this world who knew how to heal, there were still a few. However, Thea was the only one who could heal her. "I remember. I want revenge," Pamela said through gritted teeth. "Very good. Keep it this way. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying, but I'll only say it once. Your body has been completely transformed by the previous poison. The time of your death has been artificially suppressed by me, but there's not much time left. You need a comprehensive transformation of your body to ensure that you won't die from the poison energy." Thea tried to use concise words to describe her current situation. "My body." Pamela forced herself to sit up. She looked at her two green arms. The wound Thea had made was still there, but it wasn't blood that flowed out. Instead, it was a green substance. Chlorophyll. "Where's my blood? I've become a monster." Pamela covered her mouth. She wanted to cry, but there weren't any tears. "My tear ducts are gone. Am I still human?" Faced with her question, Thea thought seriously. "I don't know much about biology, but from a biological point of view, you're a plant that can walk. However, from a philosophical point of view, if you still believe in the concept of human, then you're still human." Thea's first half of the sentence made Pamela's expression turn ugly, but the second half lifted her spirits. "Why did you save me?" Pamela asked in a low voice. "I saw your ability." Thea's answer was very honest. This made Pamela feel much better. American society didn't encourage selfless help. Gotham's motto was that useless people were only fit to lie in the gutter. Although Pamela was kind, she wasn't stupid. Hearing that her ability had been chosen, she secretly sighed in relief. "How do you do this modification? Will it change my body?" Thea took out a fake yellow ring. The modification process varies from person to person. During the modification, it will read your true thoughts and strengthen you accordingly. If you're desperate to return to your human form, perhaps my ring is your only choice. Chapter 338. I accept. It suits me very well. I'm willing to dedicate the rest of my life to it. Thea's words gave Pamela hope again. "I don't need you to dedicate the rest of your life. I won't have many missions. You'll gain the power to take revenge. The rest of the time will still be yours. You can continue to grow flowers and plants." Thea was satisfied with her attitude. This girl was much more straightforward than Death Knell. With a light tap of her finger, the yellow ring flew in front of Pamela, emitting a faint light. She reached out and picked up the ring. When she put it on her middle finger, a faint yellow light surrounded Pamela. Thea casually cast a concealment spell. After Damien's teaching mission, Batman would definitely be running around. Barbara's raptor squad would also be roaming around the city. To prevent them from asking questions, it was best to avoid them. The power of the fake lantern ring was definitely not as good as the original, and the transformation process would take several times longer. Pamela was bathed in the yellow light. Although the transformation process was slow, it was done in an orderly manner. Thea was relieved and went to the rooftop to absorb the moonlight. The transformation process lasted for more than 4 hours. It was only in the wee hours of the morning that Pamela's transformation was finally completed. Theo looked at Pamela's ability through her own ring. Most of the emotional power had been used to restore her human form. Her originally green skin had returned to normal. That's right, it looked normal. The transformation of a life form could not be reversed. The lantern ring's power could only restore the color of her skin. Other than her lips and eyes, which were still slightly green, the rest of her body had returned to normal. The only ability Pamela had gained through the yellow ring was the ability to summon plants from somewhere on Earth. These plants had to be ones that she understood and had even cultivated before. In theory, if she could find a powerful plant from another planet and transplant it to Earth, she would be able to summon it after some cultivation. This summoning ability did not seem like much, but it did make up for the shortcomings of poison ivy in the original timeline. Her disadvantage from the environment in battle was greatly reduced. Theo left her a message, telling her to take revenge as she wished, but not to kill the innocent. She then left Earth and flew to the planet where Jared had been placed. Death Knell had already found the location of the shark god. To be safe, Thea felt that it was better to bring along the powerful Grud. At that time, Dead Man, Gritter, Death Knell, Poison Ivy, and Thea would form a team of 5. It shouldn't be a problem for them to take down the native Hawaiian god who was taken down by a dozen agents, right? Once again, he found Jared. He had grown from 2 meters to 3 meters. His original hostility had completely disappeared. He was lying on a big rock, surrounded by a few native aliens who had evolved from insects. They were fanning him with big leaves. Thea casually took out a banana from her interspatial ring and threw it without even looking at it. Paw! It hit Jared's face. Jared doesn't like bananas. The gorilla had a conditioned reflex after being smashed by Thea. It knew that she was here as soon as it saw the banana. Its dull voice sounded in Thea's heart. How is it? Are you having fun here? Thea's psionic ability had been given a big gift by the Martian hunter. It had evolved from the original rough type to the delicate type. The basic function of psionic transmission was no longer as difficult as before. These guys are too stupid. Jared looked at the natives who were still fanning him with disgust. Theo looked around. The natives really couldn't think of how to serve this murderous god who had descended from the sky. Fortunately, Jared's hostility dissipated very quickly, and he slowly accepted their submission. These guys racked their brains to please Jared, but unfortunately, their intelligence was too low. They only used the same few methods, which made Jared feel suffocated. Let's go. I'll take you to a more advanced planet. You'll gain more power there. Theo was very confident in Jared. After all, he was a famous villain in the original spacetime. No matter how high Sinisto's standards were, Jared would be able to move him. Sinisto had been moving frequently recently, secretly accumulating power. He had already left OUA and returned to his home planet, Corriga. Thea first released the elk from the dimensional ring to meet Jared. The two animals were quite congenial. They were both from Earth and had telepathy. This gave them a good first impression of each other. Then, under the ecstatic gaze of the natives, she put Jared into the dimensional ring. Thea flew into space, opened a wormhole, and flew into the depths of the universe. Welcome to Corriga. What do you think of my kingdom? At this time, Sinisto was in high spirits. He had changed out of the Green Lantern uniform that he had worn for many years and was now a Yellow Lantern. Thea knew that this guy still chose to go down this path. She knew that her little wings could not reach such a distant universe. Sinisto had not been stripped of his Green Lantern ring yet, but he was about to part ways with the Green Lantern Corps. It was only a matter of time before she played a role in it. It's a very good place. Are you implementing your order? Thea's eyes swept across the crowd. Sinisto relied on his strong willpower to control the Yellow Lantern ring. He used the power of the ring to maintain the order of the planet and monitor everyone's movements and heartbeat. He wanted to give his people an ideal world, but the reality was that his people were afraid of him. His Yellow Lantern ring's energy was increasing every day, and Thea's ring's energy had also increased by a lot. A perfect order is the cornerstone of the stability of the people's lives, Sinisto said proudly. Thea was too lazy to explain the key point. He might or might not know, but it had nothing to do with Thea. Naturally, she would have Hal Jordan, an old enemy, to deal with him. When Sinisto died, the two lantern rings of the same origin would merge into one. At that time, the winner would be Thea. Thea did not want to talk nonsense at the crucial time of his rebellion. I've just recruited a new subordinate. Can you give him some advice? The two skipped over the problem of governing the country. Thea talked about the purpose of this trip. This was something they had agreed on before. Thea had 3 recruitment quotas. The one that caught your eye must be this. What is this? Sinisto was shocked by Jared, who was released from the dimensional ring. There were many strange creatures in the universe, and some were 100 times stranger than Jared. However, Sinisto had recently crammed a lot of biological knowledge on Earth and suspected that he had seen wrongly. He used the lantern ring's identification function to scan Jared again. F***CK. A real gorilla. In the scientific classification of Earth, it was a primate mammal. Sinisto's face darkened. He pointed at Jared and said to Thea, "This guy is your new subordinate." "Are you kidding me? Last time, you got a dead person. This time, you got an animal. If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I won't agree." Chapter 339. I'm Jared, not an animal, you purple-skinned eggplant. Before Sinisto could finish his complaint, an unusually dull voice sounded in his mind. He could not help but look at Jared. Was it this gorilla who spoke? Yes, Jared has a very strong telepathic ability. Thea did not hear Jared's words, but she could guess it from Sinisto's expression. Telepathic ability. Sinisto was ambitious and wise. He did not care about the purple-skinned eggplant's words. He was measuring the strength of this ability. Originally, Sinisto thought that Grud, who was 3 meters tall and weighed several tons, was a melee fighter. However, he did not expect him to be a psychic. There were many races in the universe that could control their minds. Sinisto had seen many of them, but most of them were physically weak. It was rare to see a psychic with a body as big as Grud. Jared's 2 huge nostrils snorted with dissatisfaction. Sinisto asked Thea, "How strong is his psychic control?" Thea looked at the people around Sinisto. She had met Lisa Dracker last time. Amon Sum was Aubin Sum's son. She had met him a few times before. This guy had also been tricked into the yellow lamp. She did not know the other 2. One was shrouded in black fog, and the other was an alien woman with sharp teeth. Unsurprisingly, this guy covered in black fog was a weapon master. He was a life form from the antimatter universe. His strength was a little unpredictable. Sia aimed at the woman with sharp teeth and gave Jared a telepathic signal. Jared's psychic control was silent. There was no explosion or fire. The red-haired woman with sharp teeth walked slowly to Thea. "Kara Hill. Are you okay? Answer me." Sinisto shouted, but his subordinate had been completely controlled. He slowly said, "I'm Jared." "Are you kidding me? How could he be controlled so easily?" Sinisto could not believe it, but the truth was in front of him. He had realized that this gorilla was very different from the gorillas in the database of the lamp ring. In fact, Jared's psychic control could work on Sinisto, but Thea did not want to break his confidence. The users of the lamp ring had high requirements for their mentality. Without a perfect mentality, Sinisto would not be able to rebel. The lamp rings of the same color could attack, but Thea and his ring were the same. They could never attack each other. The judgment of the ring was very strict. Any subjective intention would make the lamp ring of the deceased find another way. That was why both of them did not fight each other even though they had ulterior motives. Sia's plan was to not obstruct him, or even support him in his rebellion. She would let him and Hal Jordan love and kill each other. Regardless of whether Sinistho died in battle or returned to the green light, the two rings would become one again. He gestured to Grud to release the mind control on the fanged woman, Karu Hill. It only took a second for the fanged woman's eyes to turn from confusion to fear. What did you do to me? Although she was questioning him, she didn't stop and quickly ran back to Sinistho's side. Sinistho nodded silently. There are so many strange creatures on Earth. Jared can join the Yellow Lantern Corps. He will fight for me, right? Of course, but he has to go back to Earth with me first. After that, he will stay here with you. Thea smiled happily. Jared's psychic control was a combination of her initial suggestion and his skyrocketing psychic power. As long as his psychic power was still there, his loyalty could be guaranteed. Thea did not want him to stay on Earth. She wanted him to see more life in the universe. Jared would not think that he was different. The two finalized the agreement. Sinistho gave Jared a new lamp ring, and Thea recorded the names of these people in the Book of Parallax. Jared, who wore the lamp ring, did not wear a tight-fitting combat suit. Instead, it had shoulder pads and arm guards like a suit of armor. This armored gorilla looked a bit like Vegeta's giant ape transformation. Thea was a little speechless. However, Jared's materialization ability disappointed her a little. His brain was too small, and his imagination was not enough. The things he materialized were things like scalpels, electric drills, and the like. There were also 2 bananas among them. She decided to explore his brain in the future. Thea had completed her trip. Jared had transitioned from an Earth creature to a universe creature. As long as he wanted to enhance his materialization ability, he had to see more and think more. His knowledge and vision would gradually expand, and this process would also reduce his hatred for humans. After bidding farewell to Sinistho and the others, Thea returned to Earth with Jared. Death Knell had already sent a message back to the Shark God. This was not a righteous action. Thea did not call Diana. Instead, she called back the dead people who were playing in the outer space and was ready to fight with them. How was it? Did you get your revenge? Thea first went to Poison Ivy's residence. At this time, Poison Ivy was sitting alone in front of the window, hugging her knees and spacing out. Pamela did not answer Thea's question. Her voice was a little hoarse. The school cancelled my student status. They actually thought I was dead. Hee hee. She was obviously laughing, but there was no joy in her words. Thea did not know how to comfort her. Pamela habitually wiped her face twice, but there were still no traces of tears. What do you need me to do? I want to help you expand your worldview. I want you to see how narrow your world was before. Change your clothes and come with me. Pamela was a little skeptical, but the hinting spell made her believe Thea's words. She changed her clothes and followed. Thea sensed Death Knell's location and opened a blue portal in a place where no one was around. The two walked in. After seeing the charm which used the portal so many times, Thea summarized her spatial knowledge. The portal could not be too big. If it was too big, it would waste magic. If it was too small, it would be uncomfortable. Thea could not open a portal at will, but she could cast a spell in advance to open a safe and comfortable portal. This little girl is the helper you found to slay the god. Death Knell, who was wearing a standard combat suit and carrying 2 swords, asked. Thea had been wearing a mask, so he could only tell that Thea was a woman. He did not know anything else. However, Pamela did not hide her face at all. She was dressed like a modern university student. Plus, she was still dizzy after being teleported. In Death Knell's eyes, she looked a little dumb. Everyone has a time when they are young and inexperienced. You weren't much better than her when you first started, right? She has a lot of potential. Thea casually explained. Poison Ivy's future was not ordinary. Thea was ready to give the task of training her to Slade. Didn't he like to be arrogant and call everyone a child? Let him train Poison Ivy slowly. Chapter 340. Death Knell did not think that a student like Pamela would be of any help. In his eyes, Pamela was not even comparable to Oliver from Purgatory Island. At least Oliver was an adult male. I've been on this island for a day. You said there were 2 more helpers. Where are they? Death Knell did not want to dwell on Pamela's problem. He only wanted to see what the god Thea mentioned was. Thea looked to the left of Death Knell's head. Boston Brand was wearing a red tights and was making a face. She was speechless. He's here. Boston, bring the light ring and let them know each other. Thea said. The dead man's physical body was in perfect condition. He could be seen and speak. Without the light ring, even if Thea cast true vision on them, they could only see and not communicate. Seeing a person appear above his head, Death Knell instinctively pulled out his sword. Who's there? Thea did not answer immediately. Instead, she called out Jared from the space ring and introduced him to her subordinates. A dead man and a gorilla. Poison Ivy felt that her worldview was shattered. She fell into a daze for a moment. Death Knell, Slade, was much better than her. With suspicion in his eyes, he pointed at the dead man and asked, You said this guy is dead? He's in a spirit state now. Thea corrected him. He's in a spirit state. He's the only unique life form in the world that exists between life and death. Everything else you said is correct. Slade pointed at Jared and asked, Is this a gorilla with superpowers? Before Thea could answer, Jared extended his hand and telepathically spoke in his mind. Jared likes the smell of blood on you. Slade shook hands with the gorilla in a daze. He finally got to know his weird teammate. At this moment, Poison Ivy and the dead man chimed in. Are you really Boston Brand? My classmates and I have seen your trapeze performance. Boston Brand was very experienced in dealing with such girls. With him returning to Earth and meeting Pamela, a fellow Gotham native, he began chatting with her. Thea had been observing them. Generally speaking, Slade and Gritter got along quite well. Dead Man and Poison Ivy could also get along well. Thea was not afraid that they would unite and betray her. She wanted to keep them united, but not too united. All right, now that we know each other, Death Knell, tell them about the mission. Thea interrupted their conversation. Richard quickly pulled his hand out of the gorilla's grasp. Shaking hands and chatting with a gorilla was a strange experience that he would never have imagined 10 minutes ago. Despite the fact that this gorilla was well-spoken, knowledgeable, and agreed with many of his views, Richard did not know whether to laugh or cry. A gorilla had praised him and agreed with him. What expression should he make? He cleared his throat. Everyone, our current location is about 80 nautical miles away from the main island of Hawaii. This island is not even marked on the military map. I suspect that there is some kind of strong magnetic field around the island. This island is not empty. On the contrary, there are a few villages of primitive people. They don't know about the changes in the outside world, and they don't know how small the space they are in is. They think that this island is the entire world. Our target is the god they worship. It's the shark god in Hawaii's legends. That's all I know. Well done. It was not easy to gather so much information in such a short time. Thea was not stingy with her praise. Although this god is a god in name, according to my calculations, it should be the weakest level. Divine power is proportional to faith. You may know about the Greek and Norse gods, but have you heard of the Hawaiian gods? Thea was afraid that they would have doubts, so she helped to dispel their doubts. Death Knell was not afraid of anything. He would do anything as long as he had money. Gritter also did not care about the human gods. Not to mention the dead. He was already dead, so who could do anything to him? Only Poison Ivy was still a little afraid. However, seeing that the others did not care, her courage increased. What's the exact location of the target? Thea asked Death Knell. I couldn't get anything out of the language barrier. Death Knell was a little embarrassed. Thea did not comment. The light ring could translate languages, but the language of the hundreds of natives was too primitive, so the light ring did not record it. Due to the language barrier, no matter how good Slade's interrogation skills were, it was useless. He opened the Eye of Horus and quickly found a native with leaves around his waist. He used the Martian hunter's super long-distance mind-reading ability to skip the language barrier and read his thoughts directly. After 2 minutes, Thea cut off the connection and pointed to the west side of the island. This way. The few of them walked along a winding path to the depths of the island. The path was slightly repaired, but the natives' tools were too crude. Usually, no one would walk here, so it still looked very desolate. Are there really gods in this world? Poison Ivy whispered to the dead man floating beside her. There should be. After all, a person like me who is neither dead nor alive exists. It should be reasonable for there to be a few gods, the dead man whispered back. Poison Ivy mumbled something that no one could hear clearly and followed the few of them. Along the way, Thea did not dare to use the Eye of Horus to investigate directly. She could only adjust the route according to the native's memory. This is it. I can already feel the trace of divine power, but it's very weak. Thea led the few of them to the entrance of a huge cave. She was not comforting them, but she felt that the divine power was very weak. Not to mention Diana, it was even weaker than Thea's. Be alert. The enemy has discovered us. Initially, Sia wanted to launch a sneak attack, but she had forgotten that Grud was a big guy. His heavy body made a loud thud as he walked on the road. Unless the guy inside was deaf, it was impossible for him not to notice it. Slade immediately pulled out 2 swords, and a handgun hovered behind him. Poison Ivy was a little nervous. She reflexively summoned a large number of plants. The green plants were under her control, and they grew very fast. In a few seconds, they covered the entire cave. Who dares to disturb the great shark god Kamal? Have you thought about how you will die? Now kneel down and beg for my forgiveness. I can spare you a painful death. Kneel down. Accept this great mercy. In the depths of the cave, a figure sat on a tall stone chair. There was static electricity lingering around the body. With the help of the weak light, they could see that it was a blue giant. The giant had a very anthropomorphic head. There were a few fin-like wrinkles on the top of the head, gills behind the ears, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He looked at the intruders aggressively. Chapter 341. The giant itself was more than 3 meters tall, and it was sitting at the highest point in the cave. It looked down at them from above. When it saw that they didn't kneel down while trembling like the natives, it was a little annoyed. It slowly stood up. Its blue body was engraved with many unknown patterns. It was from these patterns that the static electricity was emitted, which prevented the cave from being completely dark. Your sad fate has long been decided, you. The giant stood up, but it did not immediately attack. It waved its huge arms, and those who did not know it would think that it was giving a speech. Cut the crap. Kill it. Thea had been observing since she entered the cave. Combined with the glorious history of the original spacetime where this guy was taken down by Amanda's agents, she did not think that this guy was strong. Listening to it talking nonsense, she was annoyed. She was too lazy to guess its ability, so she threw out a chain to bind the giant's feet. Thea did not think too much. She did not know the opponent's ability, so she decided to limit its speed first. After all, there were 3 people on her side, 1 dead man and 1 gorilla. None of them were meat shields that could withstand damage. Gertrude looked big, but in fact, strictly speaking, it was a magician. So, it was a safe way to fight with long-range attacks. The first to respond to her order was poison ivy. She controlled countless plants, and she was only a second slower than Thea. The plants that covered the sky and the earth wrapped the giant tightly. Some of the plants that looked very strange even spewed out purple and red gas. Poison ivy's starting point was a little high. She did not care about the damage of the plants at all. All kinds of toxins were sprayed out. There were neurological, blood-soluble, paralyzing, hallucinogenic, and many other plant characteristics that she was not familiar with. They were all thrown on the giant's face. The originally blue and majestic face was sprayed green. The giant's face showed an angry expression, but it fell into a sluggish state. Gertrude's mind control followed. The dead man's movement was slightly slower. It instantly cast a fierce spell and then directly occupied the giant's body. The giant's legs were bound by chains, and its upper body was tied tightly by plants. In the spiritual world, Gertrude was desperately trying to control it, and the dead man was also trying to squeeze into its body. Fear was disintegrating its resistance, and the plant toxins were paralyzing its body. Its spiritual resistance was getting weaker and weaker. F***ck. Thea was a little dumbfounded. Her team was very strong. Each of them had a control skill, and this arrogant guy couldn't even fight back. However, they lacked meat shields and characters with high attack power. They would need to work on these in the future. Speaking of which, I don't have to go up, do I? Holding two long swords, Richard looked in the direction of the giant with lingering fear. Poison Vine Lady was still controlling the plants to spray poison. The air was suffused with a green color. No matter how he looked at it, the gas didn't seem to have the effect of strengthening the body. Poison Vine Lady, stop spraying. Thea hurriedly stopped Poison Ivy, who was a little excited. Even though she had eaten the fruit of the earth, she was not completely immune to these messy gases, let alone Slade and Grud. This was not a game, and they could not ignore the damage from their teammates. Huff. Huff. Poison Vine Lady quickly stopped. This round of fierce spraying was a big burden on her body. She stopped attacking, put her hands on her knees, and gasped for breath. Thea stood still and watched. She didn't care about the absorption process of the demon sword. It would be troublesome if she absorbed the Poison Vine Lady's toxins. She waited for a while until the giant's body turned from green to blue. Thea knew that this was the body's instinctive reaction. The giant's soul was being controlled, but the body's instincts were rejecting the plant toxins. Here's my chance. Thea took out the demon's sword and rushed up with big steps. The demon's sword was unsheathed, and a ray of light flashed in the dark cave. The sword's spine was suffused with a faint red light. It could feel part of Thea's intention. It was also very excited about being able to taste God's blood. With a muffled sound, the demon's sword went straight into the giant's heart. Only this much God power. Thea used her heart to feel the God power transmitted by the demon's sword. It was small, weak, and intermittent. She was very dissatisfied. She pulled out the demon's sword and stabbed it 3 times in a row. The dark blue, fist-sized God power stopped in her body like a ball of water. Weakling. Thea stabbed it for the 5th time. She couldn't absorb anything anymore. She turned to look at Jared. The gorilla rubbed his chin, and his voice was transmitted to her heart. This guy's soul realm has either suddenly increased greatly and resisted my mind control, or he's dead. The dead man floated out as well. This guy should be dead. Even his soul has dissipated. Too weak. Thea could only come to this conclusion. Maybe this guy's strength and speed were enhanced, but it couldn't be that strong. He was shouting so fiercely. Maybe he was a strong braggart. My subordinate reported that the agents of the Heavens Eye Society have arrived at the American base in Hawaii. Richard picked up a phone call. He felt that he didn't help much in the battle, so he reported in a slightly obsequious manner. Thea carefully felt the god power extracted. She didn't know if she could extract water element magic from it. But since the Heavens Eye Society was here, they could only retreat. Erase all traces of our battle. Death Knell, you're a top-notch investigation master. Go and take care of it. Actually, there wasn't any fierce battle here. The other party died before he could even make a move. The key was that poison ivy had too many plants. Many of them were obviously not from Hawaii. They had to clean them up. After instructing Death Knell and Poison Ivy to clean up the traces outside and inside the cave, Thea instructed Jared and the dead man to search for any good items nearby. She focused on dealing with the shark god's corpse. TSK, he looks quite big. Why is he so useless? Thea turned the corpse over and over for a long time. The patterns on this guy's body could be studied, but other than that, there was no other value. Horus was a second-rate god, but this guy wasn't even a second-rate god. Take it back. If there's no other way, chop it up and feed it to the elk and heifers. Thea couldn't think of any use for this corpse. She awkwardly kept it in her space ring. I've caught a captive. But this guy's intelligence is very low. Jared's voice sounded. He walked over with a murloc that was less than a meter tall. The murloc had a shark head and a human body. It trembled as it looked at the intruders. Thea observed it with the eye of Horus. This guy also had some god power in his body, but it was weaker than the guy who died just now. Was this the future Shark King of the Suicide Squad? From an ordinary person's point of view, it would be quite powerful when it grew up. It would be a pity to kill it now. This thing's intelligence wasn't high. It would be good to keep it as a guard. Thea waved her hand. Take it away. Chapter 342. Even when Shark King was young, it was not good to look at. Sia could not bring it back to Quinn's manor to raise it. After Death Knell cleaned up the traces on the island, he handed over the task of training Poison Vine Lady and raising Shark King to him. Death Knell had seen Poison Ivy's power, so he wasn't too against this task. Thea softly chanted a spell, and a small dust spell fell into the cave. From the outside, it looked like a deserted cave. She nodded, opened a portal, and left the island. Poison Ivy and Death Knell went to train, and the dead people were left for him to play with. Grud was responsible for returning to the Yellow Lantern Corps to keep track of Sinisto's progress. Thea's request was for him to learn more and watch more, and just slack off in battle. Thea went back to Star City alone. She wanted to absorb the divine power and use it to increase the water attribute magic in her body. The process of creating something from nothing required a lot of divine power. Thea absorbed it slowly without sleep for 3 days before finally forming a weak water attribute magic in her body. It's not easy. After 3 days without rest, Thea's body was damp all the time. She took a bath happily and was now wiping her hair with a towel. The shark god was too weak. He didn't have much divine power left after transforming his body. Thea barely managed to replenish the water attribute, but the entire divine power was exhausted. In order to achieve a balance between the attributes, Thea converted a small part of the other 4 attributes into the water attribute. The water attribute didn't have high attack power and healing effects, but it had good compatibility. Thea had been studying the hybrid magic since a long time ago, and she could finally use it. The lightning breath when she instantiated Diablo could be said to be her strongest attack now. But the process of instantiating, controlling, mixing the energy, and spitting it out was too long. Few brainless villains would wait and watch the whole process without attacking in advance. Moreover, this demon image really had nothing to do with justice. Xia had been thinking about whether there was an alternative. With reference to Zeus's lightning arrow and her lightning breath, Xia finally found the right direction for her future development, which was a combination of fire, wind, and water lightning spells. Strong attack power, fast speed, and it looked very righteous. Thea's magic power had already surpassed the limits of the Constantine family's books. She was on her own path. Thea, let me introduce you. This is John Deagle. He's very skilled and is completely qualified to be your bodyguard. He served in Afghanistan in the same year as me. He's also my. Lila Michaels, who was wearing a black suit, introduced the black man beside her to Thea. He's also your husband, isn't he? Thea was a little speechless at this mature woman who didn't shy away from her in-laws. As she had more and more work to do, especially entering the medical industry this time, it would cause countless people to lose their jobs. There had already been 2 small-scale kidnappings and assassinations this month. Although the movements of these people were as slow as snails in her eyes, and even if bullets hit them, they would not be able to break through their defenses. However, she could not stand the annoyance. Every time, he had to put on a show and use all kinds of coincidences to get rid of his opponent. It was really troublesome. That was why she came up with the idea on the spur of the moment, hoping that the Heavenly Eye Society would provide some retired agents or something to decorate the shop. She did not expect it at all. Lila actually pulled her husband, who was idle at home and was a house husband, out. She knew Thea's strength. If this job was really dangerous, who knew who would be the one protecting who? Of course, in all fairness, John Deagle's skills were not bad. As the future Iron Triangle of the Green Arrow team, he had been verified by history. In fact, Lila also had a mental struggle. Her husband stayed at home every day, washing clothes and cooking. It was easy to affect a man's mind. Her job in the Heavenly Eye Society was not suitable for the straightforward Deagle. Coincidentally, Thea mentioned this to Amanda. Lila very firmly took on the task. Amanda could not possibly refute her assistant's face over such a small matter, so she agreed without much thought. However, Lila did not tell her husband about Thea's strength. Deagle had a strong self-esteem. If he knew that he was just a freeloader who could do without him, he would definitely resign. Such a high-paying and safe job as a bodyguard was rare in the world. At least with Lila's knowledge, there were not many people on Earth who were more powerful than Thea. As for her husband cheating on her, she did not have to worry. Although Thea and Diana appeared and disappeared mysteriously, the Heavenly Eye Society still had some information. It was not difficult to analyze the relationship between the two. Her husband was as black as charcoal, so he was very safe. Welcome, Mr. Deagle. If you don't have anything else, from today onwards, you will be in charge of my personal security work. Thea could roughly guess Lila's intention, but there was no need to say it out loud. She herself wanted to hide it, and the Heavenly Eye Society did not want to create any large-scale supernatural phenomenon. It was a good idea to keep all kinds of clowns at the level of ordinary people. I'll start work today. The black man had been idling at home for more than a year. He did not know Thea's strength. He only felt that time was tight and the task was important. He immediately gathered a few bodyguards from the Quinn family and gave them the task. Is that your husband? Thea only asked Lila softly when the black man disappeared from her sight. Ha! Yes, yes. Lila laughed dryly. She was a little embarrassed to take her salary so openly. Thea did not mind. She just felt that her butterfly wings were getting bigger and bigger. John Deagle came to the Quinn family to be their bodyguard. What a strange fate. In the next few days, the black man carried out his duties seriously. He recruited a few more bodyguards and set up a thorough protection plan. Needless to say, he really caught an attacker and realized his personal value. The black man became even more high-spirited. Unlike how he protected Olivier in the original timeline, Thea was a woman after all. He could not protect her 24/7. However, Thea did not run all over the city like Olivier. Overall, it could be said that both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves. Thea's secret base. This is artificial intelligence. The person who exclaimed was naturally Miss Felicity Smoker, who had just returned from a business trip to Detroit's Red House. At first, she thought that Thea was joking. Artificial intelligence. You must be kidding me. How could such a sci-fi thing exist in reality? However, when the 3D projection of Gideon greeted her, the former hacker was completely stunned. Fortunately, the secret base was deep underground and had good soundproofing. Her scream did not attract anyone's attention. Is it really artificial intelligence? After receiving Thea's confirmation, Felicity's eyes widened. She was afraid that her eyes were playing tricks on her, so she used her hand to check the 3D projection of Gideon. Finally, she confirmed that she was not hallucinating. The thing from the movie was right before her eyes. Chapter 343. Is this also an extraterrestrial product? Felicity, who had seen the world in the Red House, could not help but think. Thea did not answer this question. She needed Felicity's computer knowledge to strengthen Gideon, or rather, to limit the artificial intelligence. Countless movies and TV shows had shown that an unrestricted artificial intelligence would bring disaster to mankind. Gideon on the spaceship Wave Rider had even evolved emotions, so Thea had to be careful. I'll have to study it carefully. Thea ordered Gideon to show her the source code. Felicity's eyes lit up after reading 2 lines. Then, she ignored Thea and started typing on several machines alone. The former hacker lady had been researching for a whole day. Thea had to ask her to stop because she was so focused that she forgot to eat and sleep. If Thea ignored her, she would starve to death. Miss Felicity was so excited that she poured out all of her research findings the moment they met. Thea was confused by the algorithms and logical relationships that she talked about. Anyway, Gideon was synonymous with perfection and refinement in her mouth. When do you think we can start designing the mechanical armor? Thea did not care about the construction of the artificial intelligence, as long as it did not rebel. Now. Felicity was still eating something in her mouth and said a little unclearly. Then let's get started. The design of the Iron Man armor was not too difficult. With the Atom suit as the foundation, it was coupled with the new energy source developed by the Quinn Corporation. After the research of dozens of researchers from the Quinn Group, the white dwarf fragment, which is 1 cubic centimeter in size, weighs 1 ton. This small piece of output design is reasonable and can provide electricity for a large city with a population of millions for several years. This huge energy body can completely provide energy for the power of the Iron Man armor. Atomic Knight Ray Palmer had only acquired the new energy technology after merging with the Quinn Group. His battle suit was initially powered by a white dwarf. Unfortunately, the high-density and high-temperature stellar fragments were extremely unstable, and the violent explosions had accidentally caused his atomization. Thea did not need to follow in his footsteps. The Red House laboratory had the product she needed. The white dwarf star stabilizer was the size of a small box. It could be placed inside the armor and could steadily output the energy of the white dwarf. If the enemy was difficult to deal with, the white dwarf star stabilizer could be released and the white dwarf star stabilizer could operate at 200% or even 300% for a minute. It could be said that the aliens were more than a generation ahead of Earth in terms of energy usage. Thea had built the most advanced workshop in the secret base. The AI drew the blueprints, and the mechanical arms completed the work. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her life gradually got back on track. The affairs of the group were handed over to the CEOs to handle. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, she studied the magic of feudal superstition. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, she studied modern science and manufacturing mechanical armor. In her spare time, she taught Damien, and on weekends, she played around the world with Diana. Her days were happy and fulfilling. While she was happy, there were naturally people who were unhappy. With the launch of the medical pod, a large number of medical workers were impacted. Originally, they could live a leisurely day by performing 2 surgeries a day. Now that the medical pod was on the market, they could perform a surgery in 10 minutes, and the patients could go home in 2 hours. It was more than 10 times more efficient than before. The Medical Practitioners Union, the Trauma Healing Union, the Nurses Union, the Attending Physician Union, and a bunch of other unions that Thea had never heard of responded. A group of people marched, demonstrated, and launched petitions. In the end, when they saw that no one in the Quinn group took them seriously, they filed an appeal to the federal court in a fit of anger. Under the system of separation of powers, for some reason, the court accepted the appeal. Thea, who was still developing her own weapon system, had no choice but to participate in the preliminary review. "Miss Quinn, don't be nervous. You don't have to say anything." This was the big brother of the bodyguard, Digger, who did not know the truth. "Thea, this is a small problem. Don't get agitated." This was the Heaven's Eye Society's Laura Michaels, who believed that she knew her strength. "Calm down. You must calm down." The one who said this was the Martian hunter, who was pretending to be the director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. He was afraid that Thea would go all out in anger. Because of his fear of fire, he could not stop Thea at all. The words of the 3 people sounded similar on the surface, but in reality, there was a big difference. Thea's mentality was now very detached. These people who were holding slogans and protesting loudly were zero threat to her. If she cast a large-scale fear spell on them, 80% of these people would wet their pants. She glanced at the Martian hunter from the corner of her eyes. This guy had been on guard all this time. "Hey, who organized these people?" Thea's question rang in his heart. "I don't know. The Super Investigation Bureau and the Heaven's Eye Society did not receive any news. But if I'm not wrong, it should be Lex Luthor." The Martian hunter did not hide anything from her and told her his guess. Thea pursed her lips and did not say anything. Luthor was too controlling. He would never allow different voices to appear in his sphere of influence. He had waited until today to launch his attack. It was already too late. However, this move was just to test the government and the military support for Thea. Only when he knew the bottom line could he continue with his next move. She had to create some trouble for him. Should she send Death Knell or Poison Ivy? Thea thought about it and decided that it would be better for Poison Ivy to do it. Luthor was also equipped with black technology. Death Knell had a high reputation. It would be troublesome if they were discovered. Thea did not say a word during the preliminary examination and the press conference until she left. That night, a supernatural incident occurred in Luthor's building. From time to time, there would be overtime employees who went berserk and beat up their supervisors. It was originally thought to be a single case, but there were 3 cases in 3 days. Even a fool would know that something was wrong. "Did you do this?" The Martian hunter stopped Thea early in the morning and stuffed a newspaper into her hands. Thea opened the newspaper and looked. Hey! It turned out to be the Daily Planet newspaper that did not match Luthor's. The entire front page of the newspaper was news of Luthor Group's crazy exploitation of workers. The writer was not Louise Lane, but the style of writing was more pungent. The Luthor Group in his writing was similar to a sweatshop. She denied the Martian hunter's accusation. "Don't talk nonsense. You are a master of mind control. This is obviously not a mind control method." Thea made a disgusted expression. Poison Ivy's method came and went without a trace. Who would have thought that some plants could be so powerful? The Martian hunter naturally went to the scene to observe. He did not find any traces of mind control, but this made him even more confused. Who did this? Keep it under control. Don't let the situation escalate. He left these two sentences and hurried back to continue looking for clues. Chapter 344. Over the next few days, the media was abuzz. Today, they were saying that Quinn Corporation had forced a middle-class doctor to beg on the streets. The next day, they were saying that Luther Corporation had driven several employees crazy by working overtime day and night. Both sides fought back and forth for a few rounds, maintaining a subtle bottom line, which was to test the waters without killing anyone. Just as several domestic analysts were casually analyzing the development of the situation, things suddenly calmed down. No one on the streets accused Thea anymore, and there were no more paranormal incidents in Luther Corporation. Things were just like the beginning, appearing suddenly and disappearing quickly from everyone's sight. Thea did not participate too much in this matter, because her armor had entered the final stage. Power system intact, propulsion system intact, auxiliary operating system intact, 3, 2, 1, start. In the secret base, Felicity carefully stared at the various indicators on the display screen. Thea stood in front of the left, and there were 4 mechanical arms in front of her, quickly helping her equip the iron armor that the two had worked hard to make for many days. Unlike the Iron Man next door, Thea had enough combat power. She just needed some strong defense, and did not need to make a fully enclosed armor. Her armor was not so much like the Iron Man's, but more like Dr. Destruction's. Traditional metals could not be perfectly integrated with magic. Thea thought for a while and finally took out the body of Kamal, the shark god. Disemboweling and chopping into pieces was not enough to describe her brutality. The inner layer of the armor was traditional metal, auxiliary operating system, and energy conduction system were in this layer. The outer layer was Kamal's bones. Although Kamal was weak, he was still a god, and his body still had good magic conduction. Thea engraved a large number of practical magic circles on this layer, such as strength, agility, endurance, and so on. These were all spells that could improve the overall performance of the armor. The outermost layer was made of hafnium metal, which could only be artificially synthesized. Its hardness, melting point, and quality were extremely high. Hafnium metal had the effect of resisting nuclear bombs, and considering several aspects, it was the most suitable material for Thea's armor. There was no need for a full-body armor like the Iron Man's, so naturally, there weren't so many places that needed to be tightened. The defense of the body's joints was lower, but the agility was much better than Tony Stark's straight punches and kicks. Thea was dressed very quickly. Shoulder pads, chest pads, arm pads, and leg pads were all equipped. She also wore a silver-white helmet on her head. The Eye of Horus crushed all detection equipment. There was no mask, but a mask would appear to cover her face during battle. The armor was silver-white in color, but there were red patterns on it. As a symbol for a long time in the future, a cape was a must. The two of them argued about the color of the cloak again. The cloak should be green, right? The green cloak and the silver armor seem like a good match. Felicity remembered the skateboard color battle that day and insisted on green. Thea was speechless. Silver armor and green cloak. Isn't that Professor Destruction? Would they cross dimensions and fight me to the death? He used the same words as before, saying that green was easily associated with decay and withering. It was a bunch of nonsense. In the end, Thea had the upper hand. The same color as the skateboard that day, a red cloak. After dressing up, there were a few tests to be done. The first test was strength. Even a child would understand the concept of strength defeating 10. Superman and Diana both relied on strength to crush their enemies. In the later stages of the game, Shazam and Black Adam were magic types, but they still fought with their fists every day. It could be seen that strength was a necessary attribute. 500 tons, 620 tons. 700 tons, 770 tons. The final strength was fixed at 850 tons, but this was only the result of 50% of the white dwarf's power. If it was overloaded, it would not be a problem to break through 1,000 tons. The next test was speed. Thea flew with her magic power, and her speed was about 700 miles per hour. The yellow light ring was running at full power, and it could exceed Mach 2 in the atmosphere. However, it could not last long, and the emotional consumption would be very fast. The propulsion system of the Iron Man suit came from the Red House. Its full name was Rotating Core Power Amplifier. It converted the energy of the white dwarf into propulsion. Its speed could be stable beyond the speed of sound, which was Mach 1. It did not look as good as the light ring, but it did not consume any energy. In addition, it had a strong defense and optical camouflage function. In terms of stealth and security, it was better than the light ring. Do you still want to test the weapon system? Thea avoided the satellites, flew a few laps around the vicinity, and returned to the secret base. Felicity asked. Let's try it. With the energy supply of the white dwarf, the frost gun will definitely last longer. They didn't think too much about the weapon system and directly installed the freeze gun, one in each hand. Xia didn't like the white noise cannon in the Red House's laboratory. The cone-shaped sound wave attack had too little lethality. Dr. Sereth's stone covered it tightly. Those who didn't know would think that it was some powerful weapon. After installing the frost gun on the arm, the endurance and firing speed of the frost gun were improved. A 20-square-meter house could now be completely frozen in a second. When Thea's frost gun was used against the charm witch, it took half a minute to freeze the house. Before the test was completed, the two accidentally discovered a hidden attribute of the armor. The armor had excellent underwater combat performance. According to Gideon's calculations, the armor could reach a speed of 1,500 nautical miles per hour underwater. It could be said that the armor's speed underwater was faster than the speed in the sky. This was undoubtedly the effect of Kamal's corpse. Thea could not help but think that maybe this guy was not a weakling. From this little data, she could analyze that he might be very strong underwater. It should be known that the fastest underwater person in this world should be the superhero Poseidon. With the divine trident in his hand, his super swimming speed could reach 10,000 feet per second, which was more than 3,000 meters, which was nearly 6,000 nautical miles per hour. Sigh. Theo looked down at the remains of Kamal's corpse. This guy probably died with his eyes wide open. After being beaten by their control skills on land, he did not even have the chance to use his full strength until his death. If it were not for this armor, he would only be left with the title of trash. There was no end to the development of armor, especially when Thea felt that the first armor she had developed with great ambition was actually an underwater armor. This made her a little unhappy. How to quickly equip the armor was also a problem that needed to be solved urgently. The only thing Thea could think of was to use the magic absorption property to complete the armor quickly, but that should be considered for the next armor set. Her defense problem was temporarily solved. The only thing left was the safety of the people around her. Luther had ceased his activities, but the harassment did not stop. Thea instructed Diggle to protect the CEOs of the group. At the same time, she made a small frost gun for Felicity. If the bodyguards were unreliable, this gun would be very useful. Chapter 345. Less than 2 days after the armor was completed, Thea, who was in the middle of her research, was called out for a meal. The person who asked her out was Shadow, the beautiful forensic doctor at the Star City police station. Is your father feeling better? Thea put down her bag and asked casually. He's still the same, but his complexion is much better than before. The two chatted for a while. Shadow looked around and saw that there was no one around. Then, she began to talk about the purpose of the meeting in Mandarin. You want to be a superhero and fight criminals? Thea was a little surprised to hear Shadow's words. A person from an indescribable country came to the other side of the ocean to be a superhero. It was strange no matter how she looked at it. Yes. The crime rate in Star City has been increasing recently. Many criminals were arrested but were released due to lack of evidence. Star City is my home now. I want to help, Shadow said with a serious expression. Thea had heard about this before. Malcolm's departure had created a vacuum in Star City's underworld. Many criminals who had been suppressed by him before were showing signs of re-emergence. In addition, the number of immigrants in Star City had increased over the past 2 years. The conflict between the locals and the foreigners had also increased the number of violent criminals in the city. Recently, the Quinn group had encountered several small troubles, which were inseparable from these people's eagerness to stand out. However, Sia was so busy every day that she really didn't have the energy to fight the criminals. Maybe she's a good candidate. Thea kept looking at Shadow. The little beauty was getting nervous. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Let's go to my secret base. I'll introduce you to a friend. Oh, no. You know her, Thea said something that confused Shadow. Then, she pulled Shadow to her secret base. Miss Felicity Smoker, a computer expert. You should have met her before. She's been my assistant. She's been supporting me. This is Shadow. She wants to be a superhero. I think you should cooperate with her. After all, I'm not in Star City most of the time. The two women knew each other before, but they were not close. Now that they shared some secrets, their relationship skyrocketed. Thea waited for them to chat for a while before asking, Shadow, how do you want to fight the criminals? Shadow didn't hesitate at all. I want to inherit my father's legacy. I'll use the bow and arrow. Her tone was resolute. Thea's eyes twitched as she asked with uncertainty, green battle suit. Yeah. Thea was completely speechless. Wearing green clothes and using a bow and arrow, wasn't this the green arrow appearing in advance? Was she going to call herself Green Arrow Girl? Green is good, green is good. Felicity didn't participate in the conversation, but she couldn't help but join in when she heard the topic of green. She even gave Shadow a knowing smile. Shadow was a little confused by her smile, but the gentle Shadow responded with a smile. Let me see your skills. Thea said and threw her a bow and arrow. Shadow fired 10 arrows in a row. She was a little unfamiliar with the first few arrows, but she was able to fully utilize her skills after that. Not bad. Thea gave it some thought. Shadow's archery skills were amazing in the eyes of ordinary people, but in Thea's opinion, her strength, speed, and accuracy weren't enough. Compared to Thea herself, old Ma, and the future Olivier, she was still lacking. Shadow had a rough understanding of her skills. Father once said that I'm not strong enough. No matter how much I train, I can only reach this level. Try this on. Thea tossed her a pair of gauntlets. This was a transitional product between mechanical arms and steel armor. It could only increase strength and wasn't of much use to Thea. After development, it had been left to collect dust. Ha! Shadow was smart enough to put on the gauntlets. The sudden increase in strength surprised her. She pulled the bow and arrow hard, but the bow snapped with a crack. 1 ton of strength. The gauntlets can be adjusted. Try again. Thea tossed her another bow and arrow. This time, Shadow didn't suddenly exert strength. As a result, she could pull the bowstring to its fullest. The speed of the arrows instantly increased, and all 10 arrows went through the target. Shadow was shocked. She took off the gauntlets and carefully felt the difference in strength. As a member of Thea's team, technological equipment was indispensable. Thea took out the equipment she had worn that day. "Are you afraid of heights?" Thea asked. Shadow shook her head. Was there an archer who was afraid of heights? She jumped on the roof every day. If she was afraid of heights, she wouldn't be able to play. Thea couldn't give her atomized hoverboard. First of all, the color wasn't right. She looked weird and green with a red hoverboard. Second, the hoverboard was bound to Thea's brainwaves, so no one else could use it. Fortunately, their machining skills had improved compared to 4 years ago. Gideon could further optimize the structure, so it wasn't as messy as before. In less than an hour, a new hoverboard was produced. Thea also prepared a Kevlar combat suit for her. They were about the same size, but Shadow was slightly shorter. She was equipped with all kinds of technological arrowheads, basically replicating the equipment Thea used to go to Gotham. Seeing Shadow flying around happily, Thea decided to pour cold water on her. "You're not good at close combat. If you don't want to use guns, you have to improve your close combat skills. Father only taught me archery. Come, attack me. You can only go out and fight criminals when I'm satisfied." Sia's close combat skills were among the best in the world. In her eyes, Yao Fei's close combat skills weren't that strong either. As his daughter, Shadow, was even worse. It was impossible to expect her to be able to shock the world, but she should at least be able to fight back. The next few days were spent training Shadow. In the end, Sia dragged Damien into the class as well, as she had no qualms about teaching Shadow. Damien liked the tactic of teleporting to the enemy's side, stabbing the enemy, and then running away. His magic was limited by his mana, so Thea didn't continue teaching him. She could only teach him close combat. It was too troublesome to teach both sides, so she just pulled them together. When introducing names, they couldn't mention Batman's surname. So, Thea used someone else's name when talking about Damien, which made the kid very unhappy. Shadow could only understand that such a young child had to learn martial arts because the United States was too dangerous. Children at the age of 6 had to learn martial arts to protect themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive. The gentle Shadow was quite lethal to the kid, so they got along well. Shadow's basic close combat skills were passed down from the Assassin Alliance, so they learned a lot from each other. Occasionally, Thea would feel lazy and let them practice together after teaching them. The two of them improved quickly. Chapter 346. Shadow had a good foundation, and she was an adult. She picked up all kinds of knowledge, especially some Eastern martial arts, very quickly. Damien's strength was that he had a high starting point. His physical fitness was improving every day. Whether it was Ninja Master, Batman, or Sia, their martial arts could be said to be from the same lineage. They taught him the same path. He absorbed the knowledge very quickly. He was catching up to Shadow at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Alright, let's take a break first." Sia interrupted their fight. Shadow seemed to have the upper hand, but Damien had a lot of strange tricks up his sleeves. He could maintain a stalemate for 30 moves, but after 30 moves, he could no longer do so. "Thea! Come and take a look!" Felicity shouted, interrupting their lesson. Thea was about to reply when her phone rang. She picked it up and saw that it was a call from an old acquaintance, General Ryan. Before she could say anything, the old general on the other end of the line was already shouting, "Please come to the Ministry of National Defense as soon as possible. Now, as soon as possible." With that, the old general hung up. She could hear that the other end of the line was very noisy. It was like a market, with countless people arguing and discussing. "What's going on?" Sia muttered in a low voice. General Ryan's dream of being the Minister of Defense was shattered. Perhaps it was because his reputation for human experimentation was really bad. The new Minister of Defense was General Swanwick, a general who had commanded the American Army in many battles. An unidentified flying object is approaching Earth. The Quinn Corporation's satellites have detected that it has entered the Moon's orbit. Felicity gave the answer. Aliens are here. Thea's first reaction was that aliens were here to ask for an explanation. She had done a lot of good things recently, such as using the medical pod as a reference and throwing the evil gorilla out to destroy other people's planets. But how was that possible? Thea coughed and told them to watch the house. She put on the yellow light ring and flew to the Ministry of National Defense. There were not many people in the office, but Thea knew them all. The new Minister of National Defense, General Swanwick, General Ryan, Amanda, and the Martian Manhunter, who was disguised as the director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. What is it? Everyone in the room knew her identity. Thea took off her mask and asked the new minister sitting at the head of the table. The new minister was a black general. Thea had never spoken to him before. When he opened his mouth, his voice was extremely powerful and straightforward. 5 minutes ago, a spaceship from an extraterrestrial civilization entered the Moon's orbit. They asked us to hand over an alien hiding on Earth. I think you're the most knowledgeable person on Earth about aliens. How do you think we should respond? General Swanwick felt a headache coming on. To run into something like this right after taking office was beyond unlucky. Fortunately, he knew Thea and hurriedly asked her to come up with an idea. Thea scratched her head. There were too many aliens on Earth. Which one were you looking for? Don't talk about the ones far away, there's one standing in our house right now. After deliberating over his words, he asked, Mr. Minister, did the other party mention the planet? Does he have a name? The people in the room tried to recall. He didn't mention the planet. He only mentioned that the leader was called General Zod. The one who answered her question was an old acquaintance, Amanda. General Zod. Thea let out a long sigh. He was definitely not here for her. He wanted to ask for the Martian hunter's opinion. However, many important buildings in the Pentagon, including the Heaven's Eye Society, were equipped with anti-clairvoyance and anti-mind control technology. Her telepathy was completely ineffective here. After thinking for a while, it seemed that there was nothing she couldn't say. I've heard of General Zod's name. He should be a Kryptonian. Krypton is 271,000 light-years away from Earth. Their planet exploded more than 30 years ago. Some say it was the end of the planet's lifespan. Some say it was the invasion of advanced artificial intelligence. Thea was counting on her fingers to calculate the reasons for Krypton's destruction. The Black Minister quickly interrupted her. He didn't care who blew up the planet. He only wanted to know how powerful the enemy was. Miss Quinn, I'm very pleased that you're so knowledgeable. But what I want to ask is, do they have any intention of conquering Earth? As far as I know, General Zod was a stubborn pro-war when he was on their planet. He had destroyed many civilized planets and believed in the law of the jungle. He was a veteran who was good at war. Thea didn't hide anything and told him everything she knew. General Swanwick's heart sank when he heard that. He had dealt with the Iraqis and Afghans by following the law of the jungle. If he put himself in their shoes, it wouldn't be difficult to guess what they were thinking. His mind was in a mess, but he still pretended to be calm. Can you negotiate with them? I don't expect any results, but at least we can express our wishes. Thea pursed her lips. What wishes? Isn't it just surrender? She pretended to be righteous and said, I'm willing to go, but you'd better come with me. I can only act as a driver and translator. I can't represent the country. F***ck. What you said made sense. The high-ranking officials in this room usually represented this and that, but when it was time for them to represent the country, they all shrank back. What a joke. Why would they go to an alien spaceship to negotiate? Even their ashes wouldn't come back. The people who usually bragged about how powerful they were all speechless. They all lowered their heads, afraid that they would be called to die. General Swanvik also had a headache. The president was hiding in the basement, and he had full authority to deal with the outside world. He also had to command the scene, so he shouldn't go. He looked around, and no one dared to look at him. The Sky Eye Society and the Supernatural Investigation Bureau were not qualified to represent the country. After thinking for a while, he said, "I'll go with you." "Minister, don't, Minister, please reconsider." Several people whispered to persuade him, but no one shouted, "I'll go." They all pretended to be worried, but their tense bodies were relaxed. Even Thea was a little surprised. Without fighting, she wasn't confident that she could deal with those Kryptonians. But running away was not a problem. Whether it was the power armor, the light ring, or the portal, she was sure she could escape. But all of this reflected the courage of the new minister. The grim situation had forced him into a corner, and his own decisiveness was another factor. However, it would be troublesome to bring this guy with her. Thea glanced at the Martian hunter discreetly and found that this guy was pretending that nothing was wrong. In fact, with him and Superman, they could definitely fight the Kryptonians head-on. But it seemed that he didn't want to expose his identity. "Do I need to wear a spacesuit? Do you think I need to bring a pistol?" The minister was about to say his last words. He asked Thea and told his secretary to hand over the things in the office to his wife if he didn't come back. Chapter 347. Should I use a spacesuit or not? Thea thought for a moment before she conjured a respirator and handed it to him. This respirator is modeled after the planet Corriga. It can handle the air in most parts of the universe. General Swanvik touched the thing that looked almost tangible. He was amazed. "How are we going to get up there?" "Wait for me to make a plane." Thea tried to look into the distance. The enemy's spaceship did not have space-limiting technology. Opening a portal was the fastest way, but he did not want to expose his ability in front of so many people. To show his identity as an Earthling, he conjured an F-22. "Come in." Thea waved at the black general. "Does this thing have a firepower system?" General Swanvik was familiar with his own plane. He habitually got into the plane and fumbled around. Suddenly, he remembered something. "It's all in your imagination. It's all fake." Thea knew what these people were thinking and immediately dismissed the idea. "Sit tight. Let's go." Someone had already opened the roof of the office. The layered, purely mechanical structure was claimed to be able to withstand the attack of medium-range missiles. Thea took control of the plane, rose vertically, and flew directly to the moon after it was a kilometer above the ground. The experience of flying out of the atmosphere was a bit exciting for the minister, but his emotions were quickly replaced by a deep fear. He pretended to be calm and asked, "They won't attack first, right?" "No, they won't." Thea answered without hesitation. In fact, she did not know. She was just judging from her impression of Zod. He was a very cautious man with leadership qualities. The two of them were obviously here to talk, so he would not turn them away. "Mr. Minister, you are very brave." Thea meant what she said. Seeing that the Kryptonian spaceship was getting closer and closer, General Swanvik calmed down. When he first boarded the plane, his legs were shaking like noodles. "I'm so old. No matter how useless I am, I can't embarrass myself in front of a little girl like you." "Ha!" General Swanvik threw away his politician disguise and revealed his true colors. He didn't have Thea's strength, and he didn't know that Thea didn't care about him in the face of danger. She threw away all her worries and focused on completing her mission. In some ways, he was a hero. Thea chuckled but did not say anything. They had already reached the side of the Kryptonian spaceship. The spaceship did not attack them. Instead, it opened the cabin and motioned for them to enter. The spaceship was not small at all. Xia steered the aircraft into the cabin and began to look around. The Kryptonians had a very advanced civilization. If they did not seek death by themselves, with their physical fitness and technological level, they would definitely be a powerful force in the universe. Earthlings, what's the matter? The person who welcomed them was a woman in black mechanical armor. She had some kind of translator and spoke in English, the language of Earth. Thea was very happy. She didn't have to translate anymore. She was already prepared to run away if the negotiations broke down. I'm General Swanvik. On behalf of the Earth's government, I want to see your leader. Now that the communication was smooth, General Swanvik started to shake. He waved his arms and spoke in a firm tone, showing his determination and conviction. The woman in black armor seemed to be communicating with the spaceship through some kind of communication device. Wait here. After that, she didn't leave. She stood still and stared at the two of them, especially Thea. What? Kryptonian, do you want to compete? The Kryptonians' genetic modification technology was very advanced. Thea had wanted to go in and observe. She didn't expect the woman to be so sneaky. She would rather have the leader meet them at the edge of the spaceship than let them enter the inner area. Thea was a little upset. She was a little angry that the woman in black armor was staring at her. You are not Carl Ayer. Your ability is really amazing. This is not a real thing, is it? The woman in black armor was not angry. She just looked at the aircraft curiously. Don't be surprised. Xia was interrupted by another deep voice before she could finish her sentence. Along with the voice, a muscular middle-aged man with a height of 1.9 meters appeared. He had a very short beard, and the lines of his face were very stiff. He looked dignified. Fiora, that should be some kind of materialization. I heard that there is a group of people in the universe who call themselves the Green Lantern Corps. But those people are green while this guy is yellow. They should be related to each other. The middle-aged man, General Zod, glanced at Thea's materialization a few times and said with uncertainty. Thea didn't comment and left the two generals to talk. How can you leave Earth? General Swanvik was a little weak, but he still mustered up the courage to ask. Find Carl Ayer and the central grimoire that was stolen years ago. Zod was much calmer. It was as if he was narrating a trivial matter that had nothing to do with him. What grimoire? General Swanvik didn't understand the term. His intuition told him that it was some kind of black technology that even the aliens valued. However, Zod wasn't going to explain it to him. The Black Minister could only look at Thea. Thea saw his expression and knew that he had misunderstood. She explained, it's similar to our human genetic map. Many aliens have it. Oh. General Swanvik lost interest the moment he heard about the genetic map. At first, Zod was also wondering how an Earthling knew about their grimoire. However, after hearing Thea's words, many aliens had it. He had worked hard for 30 years to modify the spaceship and arm his subordinates. After that, he came to Earth. His information was extremely limited and he didn't know anything about the outside world. When he thought of the Green Lantern Corps, Thea automatically upgraded to a knowledgeable Earthling in his heart. The two of them let go of the grimoire. If we give you the people and the grimoire, will you leave Earth? This was the thing that General Swanvik was most concerned about. I'll leave once I get what I want. I swear to Rao, Zod said seriously. General Swanvik turned to the knowledgeable Thea for help. His eyes were obviously asking who he was referring to. It's the god they believe in. Thea was also confused. What kind of deity was this Kryptonian god or Martian god? Did they really exist? Or was it just a figment of the imagination of ordinary people? She could only explain it vaguely. You're very frank. As a soldier, you deserve respect. I agree to your terms and you'll get what you need. General Swanvik then signaled to Thea that they were almost done talking. It was time for them to leave. Thea was fine with it. She could fight in space, but her ability was not as good as fighting on a planet. Besides, there was no benefit for her at all. She had nothing better to do than to take the blame for Superman. This mission was successfully completed. General Swanvik had consolidated his position in the Ministry of National Defense. Thea had also successfully connected with him. Amanda and General Ryan could step aside next time. Chapter 348. Zod didn't stop them at all, and the return trip went smoothly. Who's Carlisle? Swanwick asked Thea on the plane. His intuition told him that Thea most likely knew these strange people. You should have seen him before, but I don't know his name. The guy in the red cape during the battle at Seaside City was a Kryptonian. I don't know if he is the Carl heir they are looking for. Thea's words were 70% true and 30% false. When General Swanwick heard this, he knew that it was good news that they wouldn't have to search for Carl heir in the vast sea. The plane landed on the ground, and General Swanwick walked back to the Ministry of Defense in high spirits. He was greeted by everyone's praises. Regardless of camp, brave people were worthy of admiration. For the first time, the African minister's personal reputation suppressed all the voices of dissatisfaction. Immediately, find this Carl heir immediately. The high-spirited Minister of Defense issued a new order, and everyone started to get busy. Miss Thea, I need you to take charge for a while. Now that the African minister and Sia had gone through so many trials and tribulations together, their relationship had improved imperceptibly. The way he addressed her had already transitioned from Miss Quinn to Miss Sia. Sia also needed to strengthen their relationship. At the same time, she wanted to see the internal conflict between the Kryptonians up close. Naturally, she agreed. Not long after, Superman and Louise Lane arrived at the Ministry of Defense. Superman was there to surrender himself, while Louise was there to be captured, half forced and half willingly. The reason was that she claimed on the internet that she knew the true identity of the Kryptonians hiding on Earth. Looking at the furious Louise Lane, Thea was speechless. She came to the Ministry of Defense to talk about freedom of the press. The word fear was not in her dictionary. If it weren't for her father, General Lane, who would have talked to her nicely. She might as well drink a liter of water first before she spoke. Standing at 1.9 meters tall, Superman's red cape fluttered in the wind. He didn't surrender like he did in the original timeline. He hovered outside the Pentagon, waiting for them to come out. It was as if the minister was trying to persuade a suicidal person to commit suicide. He laid out the facts and reasoned with him. There was only one meaning behind his words. He wanted Superman to sacrifice himself for the greater good. On the surface, Superman seemed to be listening to him carefully. In fact, he had already entered a chat channel called Martian Hunter. Once they were out of the high-tech area of the Pentagon, their telepathy returned to normal. Since they knew each other well, Thea was also pulled into the chat room. With the help of the Martian Hunter's powerful telepathic ability, the three of them started chatting telepathically under everyone's watchful eyes. Uncle Rong-en, are you sure you don't want to do anything? Thea had been wondering about this for a long time. With her, Superman, and herself, the Kryptonians, who had never been exposed to the sun, would be finished in minutes. The Martian Hunter's tone was firm. I want to protect Earth as an Earthling. I won't do anything unless I have no other choice. What kind of situation is considered as a last resort? When this Kryptonian and all of you are dead. Thea rolled her eyes. He obviously wanted to be a bystander, but this guy made it sound so righteous. It was no wonder that he had been teaching psychology classes at the Zhenglian Association every day, cooking for them, and cleaning for them. He had reached a new level of idleness. Carla Danvers also wanted to come, but I persuaded her to go back. Ronan, she still needs you to take care of her. Superman's voice was a little sad. On one side was his fellow Kryptonians, and on the other side was the Earthlings who had raised him. He didn't know what to choose. Maybe he just wanted to take it one step at a time. Miss Thea, if possible, please take care of my foster mother for me. Seeing that he was saying his last words, Thea had to nod and agree. His mother must be that peasant woman. Her name was something like Martha. Superman looked like he was going to the execution ground as he ended the conversation between the three of them. While he was being lovey-dovey with Louise Ryan, he didn't know that his future father-in-law, General Ryan, was among the onlookers. Although he was curious as to who this old man was, this wasn't a game, and his character didn't have a name above his head. Plus, he had too many things on his mind right now, so he didn't pay much attention to it. He let go of Louise Ryan and flew towards General Zod's spaceship. Is this the end of the matter? The African minister asked Thea in a low voice as he asked everyone to go back to work. Should be. Thea laughed secretly. This was only the beginning. But in order not to hurt them, she told a white lie. Where is the grimoire that they want? The African minister suddenly remembered this. Thea shook her head, indicating that she didn't know. However, the minister reminded her that the Kryptonians' biotechnology was at the peak of perfection. The genetic makeup of their people had reached a perfect level. From a certain point of view, they were man-made gods. Superman's father injected the genetic map into Superman's blood and combined it with the device on the Kryptonian spaceship. Both the blood and the device were indispensable. In the original time, Zod was so sad when his spaceship was destroyed by Superman. He felt that the hope of Krypton had been destroyed. Maybe she should make a copy of this data in advance. Their genetic technology was not very useful to her. But even if it couldn't help her, it would still be beneficial to Moira, Malcolm, and the others. But these things could only be done secretly. She couldn't let these politicians know. Thea was secretly planning her plan. Time was also slowly moving forward. Sir. 2 small spaceships have entered the atmosphere. A lieutenant reported. Calculate their landing point. General Swanvik hurriedly asked. These aliens would go back on their words after getting the item. At the same time, he felt lucky. If they landed in another country, he wouldn't have to worry about them. But the lieutenant's next words shattered his fantasy. Sir, the landing point is in Kansas. Ouch. General Swanvik's expression was as if he had eaten expired food. His face instantly turned yellow. Was it too late for Kansas to become independent? I'll go take a look. Thea didn't wait for him to speak. She took the initiative to accept the mission. If she remembered correctly, Zod and the others were looking for the alien spaceship that Superman had when he was young. She had promised Superman that she would take care of his adoptive mother. No matter what, she had to do something. Kryptonians. Humph. Thea felt her fighting spirit rising rapidly as she flew. She wanted to test the combatability of her new armor. Thea finished changing her armor while accelerating. A silver armor with a red cloak covered her body. General Zod had entered through the atmosphere, while she had flown over from Washington. Their speeds were about the same, but they were much closer to Sia. She had checked Clark Kent's farm from the armor's onboard computer and arrived at the destination first. I'm Clark's friend. Old lady, you should hide first. The enemy will be here soon. Thea took off her mask and waved to Martha Kent, who had mustered up her courage to come out to investigate. The old lady didn't know what was going on, but she still ran away with the dog. Chapter 349. Before the old lady could run 100 meters with the dog in her arms, 2 alien spacecraft landed on the ground. General Zod and Fiora walked out. Both of them were wearing black power armor and long black cloaks, but General Zod's armor was stronger and thicker than Fiora's. He first looked at the surroundings before turning back to look at Xia. Xia's armor was completely different from the yellow light battle suit, but with the unique aura of a powerhouse, the two still recognized her. "Earthling, it seems that you want to fight us." General Zod's stern face had a hint of contempt. "I'm afraid you don't understand our true strength. I have conquered countless low-level planets like Earth in my lifetime." Theo laughed with her hands on her hips. "Kryptonian, let me tell you something. I have been all over the universe. I have grazed cows in Korriga and fought in Ura. You Kryptonians have only conquered a few galaxies around you. There are 3,600 sectors in the universe. Do you know which sector you are in? Remember, you are in Sector 2813, the neighbor of Sector 2814 on Earth. Next time someone asks you, you can answer him loudly." Ha! After that, she looked at General Zod as if he was a country bumpkin. "What the F***ck?" General Zod's face darkened. He was half angry and half ashamed. The Kryptonians had always thought that their civilization was advanced. Every time they conquered other planets, they looked at the local natives as if they were mentally retarded. Now that the situation had been reversed, General Zod felt extremely uncomfortable. He felt like he had just been F***ed up. However, he did not have the words to refute because he was not sure if Theo was telling the truth. The light ring could open up unlimited wormholes and warp between different regions. Although their spacecraft could also open up wormholes, it required a lot of energy, so they would not do it easily. They had landed on the surface aggressively, but now they were treated as country bumpkins. Their momentum was weakened by 20%. "I don't want to argue with you. Hand over the grimoire." General Zod was not a person who was good with words. He used to look down on the people of Earth, but now he did not mention it. He only focused on the matter of the grimoire. Theo was also a little puzzled. She remembered that in the movie, after Superman walked into a trap and was caught, his blood was drawn and his memories were read. However, he quickly caught up with them. She had been talking nonsense with them for a long time, but where was Superman? Is it because Louise Ryan didn't board the spaceship? Was that why he took so much time to escape? If he hadn't come to Kansas, wouldn't his adoptive mother be dead for sure? Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, the white dwarf star converter on his chest began to violently output energy. The magic runes on the inner layer were all lit up, and the large red cloak fluttered even though there was no wind. There was a hint of heaviness in the air. "Show me what you're made of." As soon as Thea finished speaking, the thrusters under her feet abruptly kicked off, propelling her body high into the air. She drew an arc in the air and threw a punch at General Zod. General Zod roared and gathered all the strength in his body to counter her attack. Bang! There was a muffled sound, but there was no electricity or explosion. This was a pure physical confrontation. With the two of them as the center point, the shockwave spread in all directions. Clark Kent's lawn and wooden house were all shattered. A red pickup truck was directly sent flying, rolling more than 30 meters before it fell to the ground. It was not surprising that it was scrapped. Thea did a backflip to eliminate the impact of the opponent's punch, while General Zod took a step back. The opponent's punch strength is 1,020 tons. Our armor withstood 95% of the reaction force. There are slight cracks on the right arm armor. 37% of the armor is damaged. Gideon, who was acting as the assistant control system, quickly scanned the damage of both sides. What a cheat-like race. They had never been exposed to the sun for a day, and yet they had such great strength. It was not wrong to say that they were gods who walked on the ground. I'll hold her back. Fiora, you go and get the grimoire. The fierce confrontation between the two of them destroyed the Kent family's wooden house. The spaceship that Superman rode in when he was young was particularly eye-catching among the debris. General Zod jumped up high and launched a fierce attack on Thea. At the same time, he shouted loudly to remind Fiora. "You'd better come and help your general." Thea sprayed a large amount of frost on the path that Fiora had to pass through. No technological armor could ignore absolute zero. Fiora was also very knowledgeable. She paused for a moment, allowing Thea to grab her by the arm and throw her towards General Zod. Strictly speaking, General Zod was not a bad person. Moreover, he was a general now, and he only had a few subordinates. There were only 10 of them in total. It was fine to call him General Zod, but it was also fine to call him Captain Zod. Naturally, he could not kill his loyal subordinate with a single punch. He twisted his body in the air and avoided Fiora's direct attack. He lightly patted her leg and changed from flying horizontally to standing upright. Fiora cooperated with him very well. She nimbly did a 180-degree turn in the air and landed on the ground again. The two of them tacitly exchanged glances and pounced on Thea together. Thea blocked Zod's whip kick with her left fist and grabbed Fiora's wrist with her right hand. Fiora pulled out a dagger-like short sword and stabbed and slashed. It was completely different from the martial arts on Earth. There was no difference between real and fake moves. Every move was ruthless and merciless. Thea's armor, which could withstand the bombardment of a nuclear bomb, was scratched by her. Unknowingly, Thea's attention was attracted by Fiora. Fiora's martial arts were very elegant. It had a kind of dance rhythm. However, there were fatal attacks hidden in the beautiful martial arts. Zod was the exact opposite of her. He used the traditional fighting style of the Kryptonians. He relied on his strength, speed, and abundant stamina. He was not afraid of getting tired and would seize any opportunity. Thea's individual strength was slightly weaker than Zod, including her armor. If it was a fair fight, it would not be a problem for her to fight for dozens of rounds. However, with Fiora, who was not much weaker than her, it was a little difficult. Thea had to rely on the freezing air of the frost gun to obstruct Zod's attacks. The surrounding temperature dropped visibly. Zod and Fiora's armor inevitably became a little sluggish. Damn it! Where the hell is Superman? Should I leave now? Thea was a little depressed as she punched Zod again. Ha! What she did not expect was that Zod did not use much strength in his punch. Instead, he borrowed the force of her punch and flew into the wooden house behind him. Thea was just about to chase after him when she saw Fiora rushing towards her as if she did not care about her life. The dagger in her hand flashed with bright electric arcs. The dagger could cut through armor without electric arcs. Now, the electric arcs were definitely not for decorative purposes. Thea did not know the power of the dagger, so she did not dare to take it head-on. She dodged 2 consecutive attacks. On the other hand, Fiora had completely given up on defense. Every attack was aimed at her vital points. It was not difficult to guess what she was thinking. She was trying to stall Thea. No! The central grimoire is not here. General Zod shouted as he jumped out of the wooden house wreckage. He looked at Thea immediately. Did this Earthling know something? However, he saw Martha Kent hiding far away from him from the corner of his eyes. He instantly had an idea. Chapter 350. That old lady must know something. Fiora, you continue to stall that Earthling, I'll go catch that old lady. General Zod's voice was extremely loud, and it was estimated that everyone within a 2-mile radius could hear him. This was where his brilliance lay. He could not only inform his subordinates of his purpose, but also cause trouble for Thea's actions. Zod did not believe that the other party had come all the way here to protect an Earthling's old lady. This was a blatant conspiracy, and Thea was indeed affected as he expected. That old lady didn't go far. Thea was superior to Fiora in terms of martial arts and strength. At this time, she already had the upper hand, and Thea had already knocked away the dagger that was emitting electric arcs. Hearing Zod's sudden shout, Thea was really shocked. This American old lady was really not afraid of death. She's not running even after such an earth-shattering fight. She kicked Fiora away and turned her head to look at Martha Kent's position. Oh my God! She saw the old lady hugging a dog and hiding behind a big tree. She was observing the battlefield with her hand over her eyes. She actually thought that running 300 meters away would be safe. Thea saw that Zod was about to rush forward, and she did not have time to deal with Fiora. The thrusters under her feet were operating at full power, ready to stop him. But an accident happened. Whether it was Thea or Zod, their thinking remained within the scope of normal people. They did not expect that there would be such unreasonable people in this world. A red and blue figure drew a straight line from a very far distance, and with a loud explosion, it crashed into General Zod, sending the iron-blooded general flying a few thousand meters. The angry Clark raised his casserole-sized fist and greeted Zod's face with all his might. "How dare you threaten my mother?" The momentum was so great that the two of them rushed through the farm, rushed across the road, and destroyed countless buildings along the way. Finally, they stopped in a small town 5 miles away from Kent's farm. Thea glanced at him and stopped looking. Superman still had his old problem, that was, his attacks were not organized. Zod's martial arts skills were much better than Superman's, but he could only barely hold on under the furious Superman's punches. His hood was quickly broken, and the moment his skin came into contact with the sunlight, his supersensory ability was activated. A large amount of chaotic and disorderly information flooded his mind, causing him to have a splitting headache, and his combat power directly fell to the bottom. Thea knew that there would be a spaceship coming to pick up Zod soon. The next time Zod came to Earth, he would not be able to deal with him. With his super senses, super strength, heat ray, and many other abilities, it would be better to leave such a powerful guy to his fellow countryman, Superman. "Ha, your general was sent flying. Looks like his strength isn't that great. Come and be my subordinate. I admire your ability." Fiora, who was kicked, stood up shakily. After being suppressed by Thea for so long, her armor was severely damaged. It was just that it didn't break. *T. In the face of Thea's brazen surrender, Fiora was furious. She did not have supervision now, but Zod was beaten up by Superman, and his vital signs were rapidly decreasing. She knew that there were spaceships coming to support him. Although she was cursing, there was still a shadow in her heart. Could it be that the invincible general had been defeated? Thea, who was good at brainwashing people, felt a slight change in her. Without the right guidance, this shadow would quickly be filtered out from the brain by the subjective consciousness. But what was the situation now? They were in the middle of a battle. Fiora's ability was very good. She had brains, combat power, and a certain vision. Coupled with her excellent Kryptonian bloodline, she was the third subordinate of the Yellow Lantern Corps that Thea was going to recruit. As a long-term adjutant, she was competent for most of the work. Whether it was taking over the Yellow Lantern Corps in the future or fighting on Earth, she would be a capable assistant. But all of this had to be done secretly. Superman could know part of it. After all, they were compatriots, but the U.S. government must not know about it. Thea's Eye of Horus had seen that the Kryptonian fighter had picked up General Zod, and at the same time, the U.S. military aircraft were rapidly approaching her. Thea did not hold back anymore. A large amount of water magic was injected into the armor. Because of Kamal, the shark god, this armor was not very good at all kinds of attributes. Only the water attribute performance of the armor could be exerted at 200%. Thea directly persuaded Fiora to surrender. She was not that good at talking. She was going to capture Fiora alive and bring her back for training. But Fiora's combat power was not ordinary. She was not a watermelon that could be picked casually. Plus, the U.S. military was approaching, and there was not enough time. If it was before, Thea would have no choice but to give up and wait for the next opportunity. But the passive attribute of this armor gave her a new option, and that was to fight in the water. In the water, her combat power would be greatly enhanced, and her opponent would be weakened. Plus, the seabed was very well hidden. Presumably, the Atlanteans would not tell the Pentagon. Come with me. Two dark blue magic tentacles stretched out from Thea's armor. In Fiora's confused eyes, they grabbed her and flew out of Kansas, all the way south, Oklahoma, and Texas. Fiora struggled desperately, but the magic tentacles were very tight. In the end, she followed Thea and plunged into the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. "What are you doing?" Fiora roared. As Thea expected, their armor could fight in the water, but the ability was very weak. It could only be said that it had the ability to fight underwater. As for the extent of this ability, it could be seen from the constant alarms on her armor. "I'm going to take you to see the vastness of the universe. Your vision is too narrow. You have no idea how big the world outside is." Thea was full of nonsense. She just swam to the deep sea area. Fiora was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Although she had heard this before, she still felt that it was too annoying. It was as if the Kryptonians were uncivilized aborigines. In the past, they were the ones who felt superior and used this to criticize others. Now that the situation was reversed, how could she not feel aggrieved? The most important thing was that Fiora did subconsciously believe Thea's words. Previously, General Zod only vaguely knew about the Green Lantern Corps. Out of caution, he did not argue with Thea, which was a kind of tacit agreement. Fiora, who had always regarded General Zod as a leader, misunderstood him and subconsciously developed the concept that the Kryptonians were frogs at the bottom of a well. It could be said that General Zod's caution inadvertently helped Thea. Thea's swimming speed was very fast. Although she was carrying a person and Fiora was constantly struggling, her speed was still more than 1,000 nautical miles per hour. No sea creature or submarine could catch up with her speed. Fiora's armor was already seriously damaged. The huge pressure in the deep sea accelerated the speed of the armor's damage. At first, she could barely resist a few blows. Later, her consciousness became a little blurry, and she could only punch and kick mechanically. Chapter 351. Their fight at the bottom of the sea, or rather, Thea's one-sided abuse, startled a lot of underwater creatures. But the powerful shock waves of the fight and the fast swimming speed made these creatures choose to stay far away. However, the Kryptonian's body was really resilient. Thea's armor was passive, so her strength under the water was not weakened, but increased. Hundreds of tons of force hit Fiora, but she did not suffer any fatal injuries. But many a little makes a mickle, and in the deep sea, Fiora's resistance was getting weaker and weaker. Finally, after Thea punched her in the abdomen, she could not hold on and fainted. Phew! Thea was also exhausted. It was too tiring to use physical attacks to fight the Kryptonians. The body of this kind of genetic science was too strong. It took almost 10 minutes for her to knock Fiora out. If they were on land, how long would it take? Looking up, there were a few small islands on the sea surface. Unsurprisingly, they had swum from the Gulf of Mexico to the Caribbean Sea. Thea pulled the unconscious Fiora out of the sea surface, looked around, and found an uninhabited island to rest for a while. Where should I train this Kryptonian? On Earth? Thea quickly gave up the idea. Superman was happy to see his compatriots turn over a new leaf, but he did not like to see himself brainwashing Fiora. Thea contacted the gorilla Gertrude remotely. On the surface, he was under the jurisdiction of Sinisto. The gorilla was spreading the fear of the yellow light ring on a planet, controlling two groups of aliens to fight each other. Gertrude was very happy. After a few consecutive wormholes, Thea took Fiora to a planet far away from Krypton and Earth. Asking Gertrude to find a quiet place for her, Thea began to modify Fiora's memory with magic. Compared to the Kryptonians' bodies of steel, their willpower was not strong. Thea went into the depths of their minds without much effort. This was a forbidden area that ordinary people could not touch. It was the place where all the subconscious and original consciousness were entrenched. Except for Superman, who gave birth naturally, all the Kryptonians, including Supergirl, were genetically modified. Their fate was determined before they were born. Some were warriors, some were scholars, and their genes were optimized in this direction. The fate of all the Kryptonians was determined from birth. Even if some wanted to resist, they would not take up other jobs because they could not learn anything. Superman's parents gave him freedom, or the right to choose. Superman could do any job. Zod's combat power was about the same as his, but he couldn't do anything else. His fate had already shown that he was born in battle and must die in battle. Their genes had optimized some of their characteristics, but their overall composition was delicate and fragile. Thea searched carefully and finally found what she needed. Fiora's loyalty to General Zod was very firm and unshakable. But if one observed carefully, one would find that the object of her loyalty was not entirely General Zod. Fiora's genetic modification was a little special. She was optimized as an adjutant. She had a little bit of various abilities, but relatively speaking, they were not the best. She had to have an object of loyalty in her subconscious to realize the value of her life. God is helping me. Thea had to think so. She slowly changed Fiora's impression of Zod. Father, teacher, these were the labels that Thea put on Fiora's mind. As for the object of her loyalty, she changed it to herself. Of course, the process could not be too fast. It was estimated that it would take a month for Fiora's mind to change. Thea left a cloud of dark magic in her brain. This small cloud of magic would keep her in a coma for 7 days. She had to deal with the things on Earth first before continuing the brainwashing. After instructing Gritter to take care of Fiora, Thea returned to Earth alone. It seemed like a long time, but in fact, only 20 minutes had passed. General Zod was carried away after his first exposure to sunlight, but several of his subordinates stayed behind. Originally, Fiora, the adjutant, and another tall Kryptonian were fighting Superman together. But now, Fiora had mysteriously disappeared. Not to mention Superman, even the people on Krypton did not know where Fiora had gone. No matter how advanced their communicators were, they would not be able to find Fiora across half the universe and tens of millions of light-years. In order to buy time for Zod, the tall Kryptonian guard captain could only fight Superman alone. Unfortunately, there was a big gap between their strength and Superman's, and he was beaten to the ground. Just when the Kryptonians were in despair, the Earth's army once again played the role of a useless teammate and surrounded Superman and him. Dense missiles bombarded the small town in Kansas. The Kryptonians took the opportunity to attack the Earth's army and fled back to the spaceship while Superman was saving people. Clark did not chase after them, as he did not know what to do with his compatriots. With his behavior of repaying evil with good and his strong, sunny face, he had established a relationship with the leading colonel and officially earned the title of Superman. Thea observed this scene from outside the atmosphere. Superman and Superman looked at each other from dozens of kilometers away. Superman nodded slightly, grateful that she had saved his mother. Nothing serious happened on Earth. Thea looked at the Kryptonian spaceship again. The Kryptonians were very experienced in combat. They used special means to block all the satellites on Earth. The Department of Defense was blind at this time. They could not see anything in space, which made it easier for Thea to carry out her next plan. She did not act rashly. Instead, she looked at the spaceship attentively and almost laughed out loud. Several people on the spaceship did not know that General Zod's body cells were undergoing qualitative changes due to his sudden exposure to the yellow sun. They thought that there was some kind of virus on Earth. They pushed General Zod into a super-advanced medical cabin and were busy disinfecting and sterilizing him. The timing was perfect. Theo was worried about when to get the genetic configuration map. Combined with the central tome in Superman's blood, the scientists on the spaceship had restored the Kryptonian genetic configuration program. Once General Zod recovered, they could transform Earth and rebuild Krypton. The time between restoring the map and the spaceship's explosion was very short. Thea had to admit that she was very lucky. Among this group of Kryptonians, only General Zod and Fiora were powerful. The rest of them were not worthy of Sia's attention. She directly opened a portal outside the atmosphere, stepped out, and entered the spaceship. Who is it? The Kryptonian scientist, who was debugging with his head down, did not realize that an outsider had come in. He did not look up and asked casually in the Kryptonian language. "Oh, I'm just looking around." Thea switched the ring's language to the Kryptonian channel and replied with perfect pronunciation. The Kryptonian scientist did not notice at first, but soon realized that something was wrong. The Kryptonians had a clear division of labor. Everyone had a strong purpose in doing things. How could someone say, "looking around," in such a casual tone? Chapter 352. His brain sensed that something was wrong, but he was not a warrior. He looked back reflexively and saw an iron fist gradually expanding in front of him. Then, everything went black, and he could not see anything. Tsk tisk. Thea shook her hand. This guy was too weak. The weakness of genetic modification was too obvious. Fiora could take 100 punches of this level without batting an eyelid, but this big-nosed Kryptonian scientist could be knocked down with one punch. The gap was too big. Thea then put her hands on both sides of the Kryptonian scientist's head and began to read his mind with her modified version of the Martian Manhunter. This scientist might have a sharp mind and was good at doing research, but his willpower was worse than Fiora's. All the memories were placed in an orderly manner, waiting for an outsider to read them. Theo learned how to operate the main console without hesitation. The Kryptonians were limited by the rule of technological planets that did not allow the development of artificial intelligence. They had created a pseudo-artificial intelligence that did not have the ability to think logically and could only execute orders. Thea took out the communication interface of the power armor and used the authority of the Kryptonian scientist to turn off the pseudo-artificial intelligence on the spaceship. She then connected Gideon to the Kryptonian system. "Scan and copy all their data," Thea ordered. After receiving the order, Gideon quickly started the file transfer, and a large amount of data began to enter the power armor's memory. "Who are you?" In less than 2 minutes after the data transfer, some of the backup data still caused the spaceship's alarm to ring. The tall guard captain, who was beaten up like a dog by Superman, rushed over when he heard the spaceship's alarm. But when he saw Thea, an outsider, he was obviously confused. Only Zod and Fiora had seen Thea in her yellow light costume, but now both of them were unconscious. During the battle on Earth, several Kryptonians had seen her through the monitor, but at that time, she was wearing a power armor. In other words, her yellow light costume was a new look in the eyes of the Kryptonians. "What are you doing?" The tall guard captain saw that she did not respond and asked again. In less than 30 seconds, the remaining people on the spaceship also came to the main control room. They had lived on this spaceship for 30 years. They were so bored that they almost named the microorganisms on the spaceship. Now that Thea had jumped out, they were at a loss for words. Krypton was a hierarchical planet. Several Kryptonians looked at the guard captain, who had the highest military rank, and waited for him to make a decision. If Zod and Fiora were here, they would have started the battle long ago. However, his way of thinking was still stuck at the stage of obeying orders and listening to commands. He was completely dumbfounded when he was asked to make a decision all of a sudden. Thea didn't know about his hesitation, but she didn't mind stalling for time. For a moment, it was very quiet, and only the alarm on the spaceship could be heard after the information from the mainframe computer was read. Take him down. The guard captain finally gave the order. Although it was an order, there were only 10 people on the spaceship, including the leader and the soldiers. Zod and the big-nosed scientist were dizzy. Fiora was countless light years away. Plus, there was a lab technician who couldn't fight, a spaceship mechanic, and a medical staff who was still taking care of Zod. The Kryptonian guard captain rushed up with 3 of his subordinates. Thea was too close to the control panel, so they didn't dare to use laser weapons. They were going to take down Thea with their skillful combat skills and ask her who she was. Thea was also waiting for the data to be transmitted. She wanted to have a fight with her fists and legs. She used the chosen talent, Eternal Night. Except for Fiora, who was far away in the sky, all of these guys were men. Her overall strength was suppressed by 30%. After that, she conjured a miniature version of Ares and fought with them with a spear. In outer space, there was no need to worry about Diana's feelings. The Ares that Thea conjured had the same appearance as herself. He wore a horned helmet, a half-body armor, a leather apron, and Roman shoes. He was surrounded by fighting spirit and was not to be offended. First one. A low voice came out from the conjured mouth. The Kryptonians had underestimated their enemy. Plus, their strength was suppressed by Thea's talent. The Ares conjured quickly found a flaw. He suddenly exerted force in his arms, ignored their armor, and pierced through a Kryptonian with his spear. He then shouted and threw the unlucky guy far away. The force of the swing was so great that the Kryptonian collided violently with the hull of the spaceship. With a muffled bang, a visible dent appeared on the hull of the spaceship. Several circuits were obviously damaged, and alarms were ringing like crazy. Thea didn't look at the result of her battle. If this had happened to an ordinary person, he or she would have died. But the Kryptonians might not die, and their combat strength would not be restored in a short time. The conjured Ares let out a deafening roar and dodged the chief guard's giant axe. At the same time, he turned his spear and blocked the long swords of 2 Kryptonian warriors. The 3 of them cooperated well. When the chief guard attacked, the other 2 would defend and vice versa. Their combat skills were not as complicated as those on Earth, but they were better in terms of simplicity. Thea changed several sets of martial arts in a row, but she still couldn't break through their defense. She pierced the arm of a guard, but the chief guard also hacked at her with his axe. These guys were really good at martial arts. She replenished the yellow energy and conjured Ares with a new look. The 3 of them were a little speechless. Could this thing be killed? The Kryptonian warriors had this question in their minds. Just as they were about to continue attacking, Thea threw out a chain and tied up a Kryptonian warrior who jumped in the air. When he landed, she lifted her foot and kicked him in the lower abdomen, sending him flying to the other 2 enemies. The 2 of them quickly put away their weapons and hurried to pick up their companions. After fighting for so long, Thea could see that the Kryptonians were very close to each other. She just wanted to buy time to copy the data, not kill them. Thea had always valued knowledge. This spaceship was modified from a Kryptonian prison, and after 30 years of hard work, there were many more spaceships in the universe that were more advanced than this one. She conjured Diana's lasso and tied up 2 non-combatants who were watching the fight. She shook her wrist and threw the lasso at the chief guard. "They are not combatants," the chief guard roared and went to pick up his companions. Thea didn't care whether they were combatants or not. The lasso she conjured seemed to come alive and tied up the Kryptonian warrior who was seriously injured earlier. She clasped the neck of the seriously injured warrior like a villain. "Don't come over." I will kill him if he comes over. Apparently, the chief guard had never watched such a TV series. He was so angry that his mouth was trembling. He kept saying things like, "You don't have the honor of a warrior," and "Come at me if you dare." Chapter 353. When the replication of the data reached 100%, Thea threw out the hostages. While they were busy trying to save the hostages, she shouted and threw the golden spear in her hand at the weak point of the spaceship. The spear was as fast as lightning. Thea threw it out fiercely, and it pierced a big hole in the spaceship while the Kryptonians roared in horror. Whoosh! The broken hole was followed by an unparalleled suction force. At this time, it could be seen that the Kryptonians were physically strong. They had the ability to fly in space, and they were not as panicked as humans. Several of them held on to fixed objects or pulled their companions, but none of them flew out. Everyone, take care. Thea felt a little regretful that she did not see their panicked expressions. Although they might not want to see her again, Thea still said goodbye to them. She summoned the aircraft and got out of the hole. Thea did not return to Earth. Instead, she observed from a distance. She saw that the Kryptonian spaceship was constantly on fire. Although there was no oxygen in space, they carried a lot of oxygen on the spaceship. Explosions occurred from time to time. Despite their efforts, the spaceship's orbit was inevitably tilted, and it was faintly colliding with Earth. Let's call it a day. Thea had gotten everything she needed. The Kryptonians looked like humans, but they were not the same species. They were not of much help to her body that had been transformed by divine power, but she could use the Kryptonian gene modulation technology to strengthen the physique of her parents and two brothers. She flew directly to a nearby planet, put away the aircraft, and opened a portal to return to Earth. She did not want to care about the big swaying target in the air. Whether Superman flew up to fight it or the Earthlings blew it up with some black technology, it had nothing to do with Thea. She pretended to be injured and flew slowly back to the Ministry of Defense. Sorry, the alien was too strong. I couldn't catch her and let her escape. Thea gave them the illusion that Fiora had run back to the spaceship. General Swanwick repeatedly said that it was okay. He was quite concerned about her and asked if she was hurt. Compared to Superman, an alien with boundless abilities, Thea, an Earthling, who he knew well, was much more precious. Although the foreigners had never heard of this saying, the principle was the same. She was one of their own, so she was trustworthy. Therefore, they took the opportunity to label Thea. Thea's materialization ability, according to the analysis of several experts at the Department of Defense, was nothing more than imagination. The battle with Zod was nothing more than a power armor. The authorities were not afraid of technological weapons at all, but they were afraid of Superman, who could fly thousands of miles with a single punch. After General Zod obtained the Krypton gene modulation blueprint, he immediately split his spaceship into two and headed to the north and south ends of the Earth in an attempt to modify the Earth's climate and turn it into a new Krypton. But at this time, they were busy repairing the spaceship and had no time to care about Earth. The situation was a little strange. All the satellites were blocked, so they did not know what was going on in the sky. Based on their intuition, they guessed that the aliens had not left. The situation now was that the aliens could not come down from the sky, and the Earthlings could not go up. General Swanwick did not know what to do. One of his aides suggested that Theo lead the team to destroy the aliens, but he rejected it directly. What a joke. Superman was in this room. If he suddenly attacked, who would be able to stop him? Although in the minister's mind, 3 to 5 Thea together could not defeat Superman, she could at least stop him. Fortunately, Superman and Louise Ryan shared their feelings and kissed on the spot. The guilt in his heart for raising his fist at his compatriot dissipated a lot. Because his attention was on Louise, he did not see the scene when Thea destroyed the spaceship. Now that the Kryptonians had repaired the spaceship, he did not notice anything strange. I'm going to end everything. Clark looked at Louise affectionately, then nodded to the generals and flew into space. His smile was very charming in Louise's eyes, but in General Swanwick's eyes, it was an expression of arrogance, and even a little provocation if one were to look deeper into it. They waited anxiously for the news. After a while, a guard ran in quickly. General, the satellite signal has been restored. Everyone, including Thea, breathed a sigh of relief. The Quinn family also had satellites in the sky. Although they did not have as many as Luther and Batman, there were still more than a dozen. If all of them were destroyed, the loss would be great. 7 or 8 military satellites immediately transmitted signals to the minister's office. Thea, Amanda, and the Martian hunter, who had been watching in the room for a long time, also saw the live broadcast. They saw violent explosions on Zod's spaceship. From time to time, people were knocked out of it. The spaceship, which was only temporarily repaired, was riddled with holes. What was more frightening was that the spaceship's power system was out of control. Under the influence of Earth's gravity, it was rapidly falling to the surface. The minister quickly picked up the phone and asked the Department of Defense scientists outside the room. Where is the landing point? Quickly calculate it for me. The person on the other end of the line was busy talking and finally gave the minister an answer. The landing point is in Metropolis. The minister put down the phone and was dumbfounded. Everyone in the room was also dumbfounded. The Martian hunter hesitated for a moment but stopped in her tracks because Thea had jumped out. I'll rush over immediately. My employees are all there. After saying that, she flew out of the office without greeting them. It's too late. It's falling too quickly. The minister wanted to stop her, but before he could finish, Thea had already disappeared. Thea had only used half of her speed throughout the journey. On one hand, it showed that she had not recovered from her injuries. On the other hand, she was the one who had directed this scene. When she was copying the data, she had secretly instructed Gideon to hack the spaceship's control system. Regardless of whether Superman came to wreak havoc or Earth launched a nuclear weapon, the wreckage of the spaceship would rush toward the tallest building in Metropolis. Lex Luthor's Building L. Gideon had calculated 2,239 possibilities for the spaceship to be damaged and had arranged 551 alternatives. Unless the spaceship was smashed into powder, its target would only be Building L. The Quinn group had entered Metropolis. Unlike the Luthor group, they had no foundation at all. What should they do? Thea's idea was to increase her reputation. She would not expose her ability to stop the spaceship from crashing in front of the public. Instead, she was prepared to use her original identity to provide disaster relief. If the group's reputation grew, her reputation would naturally rise. If there was no place to stay, the Quinn group would build a house for them. If they were injured, they could lie in the medical cabin and be done with it in 10 minutes. If there was no food or drink, the former Merlin shipping department would send them a large amount of food and drinking water. These were all free. In a few days, when the Quinn Group's new headquarters was set up in Metropolis, the citizens would welcome them with food and drink. Chapter 354. Zod's spaceship crashed very quickly. Not long after Thea flew out of Washington, she saw the Kryptonian spaceship slamming into Lex Luthor's building. Thea even deliberately used the Eye of Horus to observe Luthor's expression. Disaster came from the sky when one was at home. Normal people would have been stunned, but Luthor, one of DC's 3 most popular villains, reacted very quickly. Sensing that something was wrong, he left his secretary, who was reporting to him, and flew up. His shoulder smashed through the floor-to-ceiling glass, and in mid-air, he pressed a switch on his watch. A pair of green hang gliders bulged out from the back of his belt. Luthor glanced at the trajectory of the spaceship, which glided in the opposite direction. He's lucky. Thea and Luthor were competitors now, and many people knew that. Her identity as a superhuman restricted her from using illegal means to deal with Luther. Although Luther didn't know her ability, he had a lot of black technology in his hands. He was also restricted by the rules and couldn't use these lethal means to deal with Thea. Their respective abilities limited them, and they could only fight in a small area. Unless one of them had the ability to crush the world and ignore all the rules, the fight would last for a long time. Today's spaceship crash was an outside trick, and in the eyes of outsiders, it was an irresistible factor. Unfortunately, Luther was too decisive. He left his secretary and bodyguard behind and jumped down from the 100-story building. He didn't have superpowers. If the glider malfunctioned, there was a 1000% chance that he would fall to his death, and it would be the most tragic kind. But this man's decisiveness was unparalleled. He didn't hesitate to make the choice to save his life. His subordinates, his employees, they were all abandoned. Unlike the old lady in Kansas who loved to watch the fun, Luther's hang glider flew straight to the roof of a building, climbed onto a helicopter parked there, and chose to leave the city directly. Thea flew forward slowly. When she arrived at the metropolis, the formerly prosperous city was like purgatory on Earth. General Zod's spaceship crashed into the Luther building at a 45-degree angle. This landmark of the metropolis was directly cut in half. After that, the spaceship continued to roll on the ground for thousands of meters, destroying all kinds of houses and buildings. In the end, the spaceship exploded into two pieces with a deafening boom. All the Kryptonians in the spaceship were killed. Only Superman, who could not be killed, and Zod, who could absorb the yellow sunlight, survived. Thea was speechless as she looked at the furious General Zod, who was having a good time with Superman. Back then, Superman's adoptive father, Jonathan Kent, would rather die in order to save a dog than allow Superman to use his superpowers to save him. If he saw this scene today, he would probably feel that his death was not worth it, right? It was hard to understand why this Kansas farmer made such a decision. He might have hoped that Superman would live out his life as an ordinary person, but the arrangement of fate was not something he could control. Superman still went against his wishes and walked in front of everyone, taking the most important step in the eyes of the world. The Metropolis Library, the Food Center, the Art Center, and other buildings were reduced to ruins during the fight between the two. In the end, in the struggle between the two, Zod used the lives of humans as a bargaining chip and threatened Superman to make a choice. Superman had no choice but to follow his heart and become an Earthling, killing General Zod. Seeing the end of the fight, Thea knew that it was time for her to enter the scene. She found an empty room, changed back into her clothes, took out her mobile phone, and began to arrange the disaster relief mission. Although the CEOs of the group felt that it was a bit strange to go to the metropolis for disaster relief, they did not refuse. These CEOs were all employees, and the disaster relief cost was not their own money. They could earn a good reputation if they contributed their own efforts and gave instructions on the spot. Why would they not go? All of them went. A large group of people took the group's Airbus to the metropolis. What? Miss Thea, you went to the metropolis. After receiving Thea's call, Digger was completely dumbfounded. He was still looking for someone in Star City, but his employer had gone to another city. He did not know what to say. Although he was a little dissatisfied, Thea asked him to lead a team to save people. For John Digger, who was full of a sense of justice, this was a mission full of honor. He had no reason to refuse. Thea instructed Digger to bring out the hundreds of bodyguards he had recruited. This group of young and strong people was the main force of the disaster relief. After that, she contacted Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox in Gotham, hoping that the Wayne group would also help. In the original spacetime, Batman inexplicably went to the metropolis to save the injured because his Wayne building was also in the metropolis. But in this spacetime, because of Thea's participation, things took a turn. The merger of the Wayne Merlins and the news of the new headquarters being located in the metropolis made the Wayne Group give up on the strategic deployment of advancing into the metropolis. They chose to wait and see, and even had thoughts of benefiting from the conflict between the snipe and the clam. At this time, Bat was watching TV with Fu at home. After receiving Thea's call, although Batman was a little dissatisfied with Superman's unscrupulous fighting, nothing had happened to his people, so he naturally would not hate Superman so much. He expressed his support for Thea's wish to help with the disaster relief. As for him personally going to the disaster relief, he did not have the time because the clown had run away again. Jason Todd, who had become the second-generation Robin, was working hard to track down clues. After watching the live broadcast of the metropolis, he still had to catch the clown. Lucius Fox's relationship with Thea was naturally a little cold because the Wayne Group had been snatching the Wayne Group's business recently, but he also said that he would send people to participate. Thea went directly to the Wayne Group's stronghold in the metropolis. Luthor was in the north, Wayne was in the south, and the spaceship landed in the Luthor building in the north. Naturally, the battle site was also in that area. The south was affected, but the losses were not great. She found the person in charge of the scene and explained her purpose. The person in charge had no objection. After all, it was Thea who paid for it. Many of their employees were locals of the metropolis, so there was nothing to say about helping with the disaster relief. Many people took all kinds of tools and started to follow Thea to save people. Little friend, be good. Follow this uncle to the side and rest. We will save your mother, madam, don't worry. Your husband's injury has stopped bleeding. Our medical cabin will arrive soon. This kind of injury can be treated very quickly, your boyfriend is still down there. Okay, you go to the side and rest first. We will save him. Thea kept searching for survivors in the rubble. She did not use the Eye of Horus. She only relied on the thermal imaging equipment of the Wayne Group to rescue many trapped citizens. Now that she had been on many television interviews, she was also a celebrity. Even if there were people who did not know her, they would know who she was after being introduced by the people around her. She was a good person. It was rare to see such a conscientious capitalist. People had a herd mentality. More and more citizens gathered around her. Chapter 355. Everyone worked together to speed up the rescue operation. Digger and his bodyguards also arrived at the scene. They all wanted to show off in front of their new boss, so they fought to be the first to join the rescue operation. The team gradually moved from the South City to the North City. Many hot-blooded citizens who were not injured also automatically followed Sia's team. After all, Sia's team was very capable and had a large number of people. They could even be said to be the only rescue force in the city. Please, God, can someone help me? Thea heard a faint voice calling out to her. Get a few people to follow me over there. Thea did not have time to explain. She led Digger to the west. She saw two middle-aged men trying to pry open a stone slab. A woman was struggling in the gap. Editor Perry. Sia realized that this was an acquaintance. This guy was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet. Although Louise Lane had done all the interviews, Sia also knew the editor-in-chief. You are. Oh, Miss Thea, come help. At first, the old man didn't see who Sia was. In order to increase her reputation, Sia, who was a little bit of a clean freak, also went all out. Now, her face was covered in dust. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't recognize her. More than 10 strong men rushed forward and rescued the female reporter who was pressed down below. Is everyone okay? The female reporter had just crawled out and hadn't even caught her breath when she saw Louise Ryan running over from afar. Louise did not know that Sia had been involved in this matter, either openly or covertly, but she recognized Sia in an instant. The two of them greeted each other, and at the same time, a thought appeared in their minds. Why is this guy here? Xia's thoughts were very simple. Why did she always see this guy in dangerous places? Is there a mistake in my memory? Is Louise Lane not an ordinary person? Does she have the ability to teleport to wherever there is danger? I remember that she was in Washington before this. She looked behind Louise Lane and saw that a large number of American troops had entered the city. General Swanwick was directing the rescue operation with a righteous face. F***CK. How dare you fight with me for prestige? Thea couldn't take it anymore. She told the people from the Daily Planet to go back and rest while she led the rest of the team to harvest the worship of the citizens. Superman had originally planned to call it a day and go home after the fight. However, when he saw Thea helping with the disaster, he thought about it and started to rescue the citizens. Most of the people would form 3 groups to help the disaster relief. Superman was busy working alone. Ordinary people couldn't keep up with his strength and speed, and the ruins were all caused by his battle with Zod. Now that Zod was dead, the resentment of the citizens would naturally be vented on him. Although he had indeed helped a lot of people, it was impossible for the citizens to be grateful to him. The other 2 groups of rescuers were Thea and the military. Both of them had a lot of followers following behind them. Thea seemed to be more approachable. She actively helped the injured and treated everyone equally, regardless of whether they were rich or poor. General Swanwick's image wasn't as good. After all, he was in his 50s. Thea helping an old lady was an act of kindness. He really couldn't bring himself to help an old lady. What if he was called a hooligan? However, the military's reputation still attracted many citizens to join his rescue team. Those who didn't know the inside story of Thea's actions would only think that she was being kind. However, General Swanwick knew the truth. He wasn't sure if she was being kind or not, but Thea leading 4 or 5 young people and pretending to be struggling to rescue the citizens under the cement pillars was 100% putting on a show. However, he didn't object to putting on a show. How many people around him didn't put on a show? From a certain point of view, he was even a little relieved. This was the performance of one of his own people. Politicians weren't afraid of putting on a show because they did it too. It didn't matter if there was one more or one less person. What they were afraid of was someone with impeccable moral integrity. For example, the guy in the blue tights and red cloak in the distance, who was known as Superman, had perfectly demonstrated what it meant to have his feet touch the ground. He had been hovering in the air to rescue people, and his feet didn't touch the ground at all. This made General Swanwick feel a little empty. Could such a person really obey the orders of the country and respect the Constitution? General, the young heir of the Quinn Group wants our transport plane to help her transport the medical pod. One of the African minister's subordinates reported to him. Thea didn't intend to reveal her identity in front of everyone. The African minister immediately understood what she meant and nodded in agreement. Benefits were also a way to build relationships. It couldn't be a one-sided effort. Only by helping each other could the relationship be stable. The 2 didn't communicate with words or eyes. They completed the cooperation tacitly. With the orders of the Minister of Defense, the military transport plane C-17 was mobilized quickly. In less than half an hour, the medical pod produced by the Quinn Group had been transported to the metropolis. 70% of the injured citizens had external injuries. A series of debridement and suturing work could be completed within 10 minutes of lying in the medical pod. The medical personnel on the scene were still dissatisfied with this kind of technological equipment for destroying their livelihood, but they were secretly relieved that their workload had been greatly reduced. Superman could destroy the world, but he didn't have the ability to heal. Seeing that Thea's medical ability was fast and that countless seriously injured people were transported over, the citizens finally had a good impression of him under his perseverance. They were no longer as cold as before. However, medicine couldn't cure diseases. No matter how heaven-defying the medical pod was, it couldn't save the dead. When the rescue team arrived at the ruins of the former Luther building, a large number of the dead were transported out. The impact was swift and violent. Many people were not as decisive as Luther and were directly buried under hundreds of tons of rubble. Superman didn't know that his ability was strongly feared by the military. With the combination of X-ray vision and super strength, although most of the buried people were dead, he still rescued a few seriously injured people. "Chairman, we found Mr. Luther's secretary. She's seriously injured," a senior executive whispered to Thea. Thea had already seen the secretary sent out by Superman, Mercy Graves. This woman was not only Luther's secretary, but also his bodyguard. She was extremely skilled and could even exchange a few blows with death knell. She was loyal to Luther. The only pity was that her name wasn't good. Mercy. Mercy. Whether it was the original space-time or the present, she had been ruthlessly abandoned by Luther. The secretary sent out by Superman was seriously injured. Her usually cold and delicate face was a little distorted. Although her reaction wasn't bad, she didn't have the technological equipment. The impact was too fast. She relied on her superb skills to avoid fatal injuries. However, falling from a height of hundreds of meters still put her body in a state of near death. Both of her legs were fractured and her organs were severely damaged. With the current medical conditions, it would take a miracle for her to recover. Save her. Thea glanced coldly at the senior executive who wanted to offer advice and stopped him from speaking. Near evening, the construction team of the Quinn Group arrived and built simple houses for all the homeless people to live in. Chapter 356. After taking a stroll outside and finding that the metropolis was safe, Luther and the president, who had been hiding in the basement, also sent a special envoy. The two groups of people arrived at the metropolis at the same time. Before the special envoy could make a passionate speech, he was stopped by Luther, who had arrived one step ahead of him. "What did you say?" "Ask the government to compensate your building and employees' pensions." "Mr. Luther, are you sure you're not overly shocked?" The special envoy was a middle-aged man with a hooked nose. He refused Luther's request without hesitation. "If you don't want to compensate, then the military should pay. In short, your incompetence has caused me great losses. You have to give me an explanation." The long-haired Lex Luthor ignored the angry stares of the special envoy and Swanwick. His expression was solemn and serious. Luther was different from Bruce, who was severely constrained, and Thea, who had just taken over the group. His personal prestige was at the top of the group. He had hidden some technological weapons and secret bases all over the world, always in case of sudden changes. He didn't care how much the building and the employees' pensions cost. He just wanted to take the opportunity to get some benefits, such as the wreckage of the alien spaceship or Zod's body. But he seriously underestimated the military's fear of Superman. Dream on. You want the military to compensate. The military also provided protection. Now most of the people who are treating the civilians are soldiers. Swanwick refused immediately. No way. These things belong to the military. No one could touch them. Luther's hidden strength was not small, but he couldn't openly confront the U.S. military. His eyes flashed with wisdom, and in the end, he chose to wait and see. "Miss Quinn, thank you for treating my employees." Luther was arrogant, but he was not a rude person. On the contrary, he was very polite. Seeing Thea constantly treating the wounded, he immediately rushed over and expressed his gratitude to Thea. "Mr. Luther, you're too polite. This is what I should do. Your secretary, Miss Mercy Graves, is seriously injured. If you have a better way, you should treat her quickly." Thea wanted to see how Luther would respond. Luther's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thea did not intend to let go of this opportunity. She said with a hint of sarcasm, "Miss Mercy's name is not good." "Mercy? Pity. Mr. Luther only believes in himself, he doesn't need pity. Lex Luthor still maintained his demeanor as if he hadn't heard anything. He nodded slightly. I'm going to visit my employee. Humph. Thea snorted softly. She didn't expect this little episode to defeat Luthor. It had nothing to do with right or wrong. She just felt that the arrogance in his bones was annoying. The treatment lasted for 3 days. Whether it was the president or the various representatives, they went around the metropolis like a merry-go-round. Other than showing their presence, they did not provide any practical help. Because the nature of the incident had not been determined, was it a natural disaster or a man-made disaster? They couldn't even find the culprit. Student Superman had escaped that very night. Now, the person who appeared in the metropolis was a young man from Kansas with old-fashioned eyes. His name was Clark Kent. There were injuries and deaths in the Daily Planet, so there were many vacancies. Naturally, he successfully obtained the position of an intern reporter. These Americans face blindness is too serious. This disease needs to be cured. Can't they recognize him just by wearing ordinary clothes and a pair of glasses? Thea saw Brother Superman pretending to be an ordinary reporter from the corner of her eye and couldn't help but think so. She was now sitting in the audience. A representative from Kentucky, Miss Joan Vinci, was giving a passionate speech. Thea pretended to listen carefully and clapped from time to time to show her attitude. Ms. Vinci, what you said was great. Thea said after the meeting. Thea, you're getting more and more beautiful. What a sweet mouth. Joan Vinci was Moira's political ally. Whether Moira's next step was to enter Congress or run for governor, she would need a lot of supporters. Thea just showed her support and didn't say much. She now had more things to do than these politicians. The cake of rebuilding the metropolis fell into the hands of the Quinn Group. Just the initial estimate was that it could bring in a profit of $1 billion for the group. Luthor was naturally jealous, but he was a high-tech group. He had no problem researching technology, but he had to stand aside when it came to building houses. And in the past 2 years, rebuilding Seaside City and Midway City, the Quinn Group's urban construction team was trained. A large number of skilled workers were hard work in itself, so it was useless for other groups to be jealous. After gaining a lot of reputation, the Quinn Group's new headquarters was officially built in the metropolis. The unlucky Luthor gave up on the compensation. The original site of his group was forcibly requisitioned by the military because it was the crash site of the alien spaceship. He couldn't win against the military, so he had no choice but to gather his people and choose the site to rebuild Building L. In a short time, the bustling metropolis could be renamed as a big construction site because there were more excavators than cars in the city. That evening, Thea avoided everyone's gaze and changed into a yellow light costume alone. She went to a hidden corner in the city. Death Knell, what's the matter? The burly Death Knell walked out from the shadows. His originally burly body was now transformed by the energy of the light ring, making him as strong as a brown bear. Boss, someone issued a high-reward mission in the underground world. Death Knell was hesitant, but he still said it. I won't interfere with your mission. I remember I told you before. Death Knell organized his words and said cautiously, according to my principles, I will accept it. But personally, I am very against it. Oh. Death Knell, who valued money more than his life, was there a mission that he didn't want to accept? Thea's curiosity was piqued. What mission? Threaten a rich man who has been in the limelight recently. In the limelight. Thea made some connections, and with Death Knell's personally against it, she seemed to have guessed something. What's the name of the rich man? Death Knell gritted his teeth, but the hinting technique made him choose to obey. Quinn Merlin Group's new chairman, Thea Quinn. As if he was afraid that Thea would accept the mission, he quickly added, I have a good relationship with her brother. I don't really want to do this mission, F*CK, F*CK, F*CK. Thea could only rely on this to express her dissatisfaction. She wasn't sure if Luther was the one who did this, but it was definitely one of the few people who were jealous of her getting the big cake. Moreover, she actually heard this news from Death Knell. This was too melodramatic. She thought carefully about Death Knell's description. Threaten. The other party seemed to have some scruples as they didn't issue any mission with a bounty. Luther's chances of success increased by 20%. Thea knew that she had to reveal her true identity. She asked Death Knell softly, "Do you know who I am?" "Ah." Death Knell was a little confused. Why did the topic change? The jump was too big. After thinking carefully, he shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Thea took off her mask and looked at him speechlessly. "I am Thea Quinn." Chapter 357. Ha! Death Knell felt like a crow had just flown over his head. He was stunned for a long time before he realized that his hearing wasn't faulty. He then glanced at Thea's face. That's right. She looked exactly the same as the one that appeared in the news. After Thea's heroic act of saving the citizens of Metropolis City was exposed, the number of people who knew her increased at an alarming rate. Her picture appeared in many newspapers, magazines, and online media. "You're Olivier's sister?" Death Knell asked with uncertainty. Thea nodded. "That's right." Death Knell didn't say anything. He lowered his head and fell into deep thought. What did Olivier say about his sister back then? Kind, cute, obedient, naive, and pure. He couldn't help but tilt his head to look at Thea. This witch in front of him has nothing to do with any of those words, right? He recalled Olivier's vow to protect his family and his sister. But does this guy really need you to protect him? Even if the earth exploded in the next second, she would still be able to survive. The experienced Death Knell couldn't help but think deeper. Olivier definitely didn't know about his sister's abilities. Compared to Thea, who hid her abilities well, Olivier was as innocent as a little bunny who wandered alone on a deserted island while Thea inherited the family business. Is there some kind of inside story? Thea didn't know about Death Knell's wild thoughts. Since she had shown her true colors, there were some things that she could tell Death Knell. She said half-truthfully, "That day, I went to Purgatory Island to look for you guys. Unfortunately, I was delayed by something. When I returned to the island, you guys had already left." Ha! The amount of information he received in a short period of time was a little too much. Death Knell's sharp mind spun a few times before he understood. The one in red on Purgatory Island that day was you. You're the one who took Shadow away. In his anger, Death Knell's suggestion spell almost failed to suppress his emotions. He was halfway through drawing his sword, but his consciousness was still affected by the spell and automatically calmed down. What's wrong? Are you still thinking about Shadow? Your daughter is about the same age as Shadow, right? Thea sneered. Humph. Death Knell harumphed. Now that he had calmed down and thought about it, Shadow was just a beautiful object in his heart. It was completely due to his male desire to monopolize her. It was a far cry from love. If Thea hadn't mentioned her today, he would have forgotten about her. The two of them quickly brushed past the past and focused on the present. Death Knell might look like a burly man, but he was actually very intelligent. A few thoughts flashed through his mind, and together with Thea revealing her identity, he immediately thought of many things. You're competing with Luther. Do you suspect that he hired someone from the underground world? Death Knell had seen too many of the methods of these rich people, so it did not take much effort for him to guess the answer. The chances of it being Luther are higher, but it could also be someone else. She did not care about any threats. The weapons on Earth had almost no effect on her. Her only weakness was her family. If she went all out, no matter how high Luther's IQ was, he would not be able to withstand a single blow from her. I know Lex Luthor. He's too smart. Even if you have superpowers, you can't underestimate him. Don't worry, I can roughly guess Luther's mentality. His intelligence made him who he is, but it will also destroy him. He's too arrogant, thinking that he can control everyone's fate. It's just because I stole his limelight. In a few days, he'll find his nemesis. Thea's words were a little confusing. Death Knell did not fully understand, but he was not the type to get to the bottom of things. What do you need me to do? Infiltrate his inner circle and pass on a message. You don't have to do it deliberately. Let nature take its course. Luther doesn't trust anyone, so there's no need to waste your time. Your mission is to continue to take root in the underground world and understand all the dark corners of this world. Thea finished and thought for a moment. You can accept the mission to kidnap me. Just pretend to fight. As for Luther's side, use other channels to issue a mission, regardless of life or death. These rich people have nothing better to do. They just want to put on a show for others to see. As a mercenary, Death Knell was a little dissatisfied with this matter, but he still agreed. On the third day after the two ended their conversation, Thea was attacked. A few days later, she was attacked twice in a row. During the third attack, Death Knell personally took action, but he was repelled by Digger, who was armed with a simple frost gun. Thea was attacked, but Luther's side did not have it easy either. Within a week, he was attacked by gunmen 4 times. The last time, the mercenary Death Archer, who fought alongside Thea against the Charm Witch, could not resist the temptation of money and personally took action. He shot Luther's long hair from a distance, but the bullet was blocked by a layer of transparent energy shield. Subsequently, the underground world removed these 2 missions at the same time. Both of them revealed some technological equipment. As for whether it was active or passive, only they knew. Just as Thea predicted, Luther quickly shifted his attention. Ordinary business battles did not have much interest in him. He had his eyes on the superhero who had recently risen in the metropolis, Superman. This pair of old enemies still had the fate of going against each other. Because of the battle between Superman and Zod, where the spaceship destroyed his iconic building, the conceited Luther was jealous, dissatisfied, fearful, and other emotions mixed with hatred. As for Thea, because she was too busy, some people sent her a signal to stop, and she obediently withdrew the bounty. She spent the extra energy on studying the Kryptonian genetic modulation map. The data was extensive and profound. In the movie, Luther secretly used Zod's corpse to create Doomsday. This was simply nonsense. The probability of finding information on the super-biological cells invented by the ancient Kryptonian scientists in such a huge amount of data was less than 1 in a billion. Thea was clearly looking for information on Doomsday. Gideon worked with the supercomputer and searched for 2 days before he found it in an inconspicuous corner. Luther was very smart and had the so-called level 9 intelligence, but this referred to his IQ. In terms of pure computing power, he could never catch up to an artificial intelligence. It was obvious that someone of a higher level had interfered with his judgment. The mastermind behind this, if there were no surprises, was Dawn Star Darkseid's uncle, the Wasteland Wolf. The other party definitely did not teach Luther the knowledge of Doomsday just because he was a complete celestial being. There was a lot of inside information. Thea could not see the other party's intention at the moment. She could defeat mortals, but she was a little weak in the eyes of the new gods. She needed to plan ahead. Kill Luther directly. First of all, Luther was not easy to kill. Second, if Luther died, there would be others. There was a company of mad scientists on Earth. What was to come would come, and it would not stop because of one person's life or death. Thea did not want to run away. She wanted to see how strong these new gods were. She ordered Gideon to bring up all the information on Doomsday. She wanted to study it carefully to see if there were any flaws, and if she could even take Doomsday for her own use. Chapter 358. No, it's still not working. Thea flipped through the records of doomsday from the past tens of thousands of years on Krypton. Countless scientists had tried to control doomsday and make this biochemical weapon their own. Genetic modification, cell manipulation, targeted therapy, some methods that Thea could think of and some that she had never seen before had been tested on doomsday one by one. But all these attempts failed without exception. The scientists did not dare to let doomsday's cells grow, so they had no choice but to seal off the phantom zone. Doomsday had been resurrected twice over the past tens of thousands of years. Although the Kryptonians did not have the power of Superman, they still found Doomsday's weakness, which was his fear of kryptonite. Both times, Doomsday was defeated by the sheer number of Kryptonians. The ancient Kryptonian god, Rao, once left a prophecy that Doomsday would return to the world. In order to prevent the recurrence of the disaster, the Kryptonian Supreme Council originally planned to destroy all the data, but in order to preserve the information of Doomsday for future generations, they finally chose to seal it. There were 3 conditions to resurrect Doomsday: Doomsday's cells, Kryptonian corpses, and Kryptonian genetic modification technology. Now, Doomsday's cells were brought out by Zod, who was exiled to the Phantom Zone. Besides General Zod, there were 4 more Kryptonian corpses than in the original timeline. When the spaceship exploded, there might be some corpses that were blown up, so it was hard to count. Thea had all the genetic modification technology in her hands. When she first read the data, she was very rough. It was more like cutting than copying. Plus, the spaceship had crashed. At best, only 10% of the data was left for the military. Even this 10% was incomplete. Some of the data had conclusions but no derivation process, and some had reasons but no results. It was difficult for the scientists on Earth to derive anything from these incomplete data. Thea had tried to participate in the research of extraterrestrial technology, but the military's intention was obvious. They would only allow outsiders like Thea and Luther to participate if they could not find anything. As for Superman, he wanted to participate. He would wait until all the people on Earth were dead. Everything was back on track, and the citizens of the metropolis had recovered from the shock. The official data was that thousands of people were killed, but Thea was in charge of the medical cabin. According to the most conservative estimate, the death toll was no less than 5,000, and tens of thousands of people were missing. However, this was all Superman's fault and had nothing to do with her. She would rush to the alien planet every few days to modify Fiora's memory to the final stage. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. The image of General Zod gradually became an elder in Fiora's heart, a relative. Subconsciously, she did not reject this kind of scene. However, when it came to the change of allegiance, Thea felt a strong resistance. Fiora's recognition of her was really low. Thea refused to admit defeat and continued to increase her magic output. She had to convince her. Fiora, who was unconscious on the first day, subconsciously lost her loyalty and was filled with confusion. Thea took advantage of the situation and the effect was remarkable. However, there was a sudden change on the second day. Fiora's allegiance was forcibly conjured up in her mind, and it was none other than Thea's old acquaintance, Clark Kent. Damn! Do you know each other? You should pledge your loyalty to him. In the original spacetime, you had at least fought with him once, but in this world, Fiora had only met him once when Superman surrendered. The two of them weren't familiar with each other at all. She had painstakingly spent half a day to train someone else's underling. Thea was not so selfless. Her magic continued to pour in. On the third day, something even more devastating happened. Perhaps Fiora really did not have a deep impression of Superman, and the idea of pledging her loyalty came and went quickly. However, there was an inexplicable mission to continue Krypton in her mind. It sounded great and noble, but Fiora's subconscious thought was that the way to continue Krypton's mission was to give birth to babies for Superman. Thea directly spat out a mouthful of old blood. Just thinking of the image made her irritated. She might as well pledge her loyalty to Superman. In desperation, Thea could only wake Fiora up. In order to get her wholeheartedly support, she had to break her original worldview. It was too easy to break the worldview of the Earthlings. She just had to drag them to another planet. Although it was more troublesome to deal with this Kryptonian, there were still ways. Where is this? Thea withdrew her magic from Fiora's mind. The Kryptonian's powerful self-healing ability kicked in. She quickly sat up and looked at the purple sky outside the house. She asked with uncertainty. If Krypton and Earth are in the south of the universe, this is the west. It's a planet in Sector 1125. With the speed of your Kryptonian spaceship, you can return home in about 812 years. Thea replied with her arms crossed. It was good news that the Kryptonian spaceship did not start a war. General and the others. Fiora's voice returned to normal, as if she was asking about something unrelated to her. General Zod was a true warrior. He was born on the battlefield, and he died on the battlefield. Thea had been studying Kryptonian genetic modification recently. The information revealed between the lines gave her some understanding of Kryptonian customs. For someone like Zod, who was born a warrior, dying on the battlefield was definitely more honorable than dying at home. Especially since he was of the same generation as